We're starting with something a little different. Not a battle, not a royal court. Just a quiet day in an ordinary medieval village, the kind most people would pass without noticing. It should have been too small to last. Too plain to be remembered. A few thatched roofs, a muddy lane, smoke that never quite leaves the walls. A place like that should have vanished into the fields. But it didn't. It stayed. It kept waking up. It kept doing the same small things, over and over, across years, decades, even centuries. And the truth is, that steady sameness is where the real story lives. You don't need to do anything. The day has already passed. Your only job is to rest. If this kind of calm history helps you sleep, you can subscribe to Velvet Night Vellum and let these long, quiet nights keep coming. Now let's begin. You are still inside the last edge of night. The air is cool in a way that feels honest, like it has not been warmed by anyone yet. Somewhere nearby, a hinge gives a soft complaint as a door opens. A shape slips out, careful not to wake the room behind it. You hear straw shift underfoot, then the gentler sound of bare feet meeting packed earth. A hearth inside one house holds a dull warmth. Not flame, just the stubborn memory of it. The room smells like old wood smoke and damp wool. Outside, the village breathes in small noises. A cow shifts in its stall. A bucket taps against the stones of the well as someone lowers it down. Rope slides rough and steady, then the quiet gulp of water returning. For a while, this is how morning arrives. Not in a rush. Not announced, just built from little motions. Down the lane, the parish church sits in the dark, its stones colder than everything around it. Beyond that, the manor is only a presence, not seen clearly yet, but felt all the same. The fields wait in silence, heavy with the promise of work. Even the market feels far away, like an idea that will matter later, after the first chores are done. A latch clicks again. A cloak is pulled close. A hand rests on a doorframe for a breath, then lets go. The village does not try to impress anyone. It simply starts. And in that plain beginning, you can settle, the way the body settles when nothing is being demanded. You stay close to the ground in these first minutes, because the village itself does. Nothing here starts with grand words. It starts with touch. Cold wood under a palm. Rough rope sliding through fingers. The damp bite of air that clings to your wrists when you step outside. The lane is a narrow strip that has learned the shape of feet. It isn't paved. It's pressed down by years of walking, by cart wheels that cut shallow grooves, by rain that returns again and again to the same low places. Under your steps, the earth gives slightly, like it is still deciding whether it wants to be mud or dust today. You hear water before you see it. A bucket rises at the well with that familiar rhythm rope. Wood. Stone, a soft knock as the rim touches the side. The person drawing it doesn't speak. There's no reason to. Their breath comes out in pale clouds, and you can hear the small effort in each pull. When the bucket breaks the surface below, it makes a hollow sound, like the well has its own throat. A few doors down, someone is awake enough to coax the hearth back to life, not with drama. Just patience. A thin stick pokes at ash. A hand shields a small ember. You hear the first crackle, quiet as a whisper. Then a little more. Smoke begins to thread up through the roof vent. And the smell finds you even out here. Old wood, last night's soot, and the faint sharpness of fresh kindling. For a while, this worked. A village can run on small fires and small habits, each household pushing itself forward one careful step at a time. The first animals to fully accept the morning are the ones who sleep closest to people. A pig shifts and snorts, offended by the cold. A goat knocks a wooden rail with its horn, testing the world the way goats always do. A dog pads out into the lane, nails clicking on a flat stone, then stops to listen as if it has a job. You pass a house where the door is still shut, but you can hear life behind it. Straw rustling. A low murmur, not quite speech. More like two people sharing a routine without needing words. A baby fusses once, then the sound is softened, swallowed by a blanket and a familiar arm. The houses are close enough that the village feels like one big living thing. Timber frames, wattle and daub walls, roofs of thatch that hold the night's dampness. Smoke stains around the openings, darkening the plaster over the years in the same places. Nothing matches perfectly, that's normal. Repairs happen when they must. A board here. A patch of clay there. A rope tightened. a hole stuffed with straw until someone has time to do it properly, which might be a long time. You catch the smell of porridge starting somewhere. It isn't strong yet, just a hint. Warm grain and water, plain and reliable. The kind of food that doesn't ask to be admired, it just keeps you standing. Somebody crosses the lane with a pail. The handle bites into their hand, and you can see the way they angle their wrist to carry the weight without thinking. Water sloshes softly inside, a steady, calming sound. They don't spill much. People here learn not to. A rooster finally decides to speak up. The call slices through the dimness, sharp and sure, as if it has been waiting for permission. Another rooster answers from farther off, and suddenly the village feels wider. A few birds in the hedges shuffle and chirp, not singing, just acknowledging the shift from night to morning. Meanwhile, the church sits with its own quiet authority. You can't miss it, even when you're trying not to look. Stone holds cold the way wood never can. The walls seem to keep secrets, not because they're mysterious, but because they've been standing through so many ordinary days that any one of them could disappear into the next. Near the churchyard, the air smells a little different. Moss, wet stone, and the faint, earthy scent of turned ground. The bell, if it rings at all this early, does so like a reminder, not a celebration. A small sound carried on the air, thin and practical. It doesn't demand attention. It simply says the day exists now, and people will do what they always do with it. You drift toward the edge of the village where the houses thin out and the open land begins. The fields are not pretty in the way a painting might want. They're functional. Dark soil, stubble from the last harvest, furrows that hold water after rain. In the distance, you can make out a line of trees and the faint suggestion of a track leading away, the one that reaches other villages, the market town, the world beyond. The market is not here. Not today, not in this moment. Still, it lives in the back of the mind. Wool that might be traded. Eggs carried in a basket with straw. A sack of grain measured carefully because every handful has a future. A little salt, if you can get it. A strip of iron, if someone needs a tool repaired. These are not exciting thoughts. They're practical ones. They sit quietly in the day like stones at the bottom of a stream. And above all of it, there's the manner. You don't have to see it clearly to feel it. The idea of it is enough. Rent, obligations. Days of labor owed. The kind of pressure that doesn't shout, but never really leaves. People don't talk about it every minute. They don't have the energy. Still, it shapes choices the way weather shapes the ground. What's easy to forget is how many mornings begin with quiet bargaining. Not loud arguments, just small decisions. Who goes to the field first? Who stays to watch the children? Who walks to the well? Who checks the fence? Who saves a little flour for later, even if the bowl feels thin today? A man steps out with a bundle of firewood. The sticks knock together softly, a dry tapping sound. He pauses to adjust the rope around them, then carries them in a way that keeps his shoulders steady. Work done wrong hurts. Work done right is almost invisible. Near a doorway, you hear someone sharpening a blade. Not fast, not showy. Just the rasp of metal on stone, slow enough that it turns into a kind of rhythm. You feel how the village teaches patience. Everything here lasts longer when you treat it carefully. For a moment, the lane fills with two people crossing in opposite directions. They don't stop. They don't greet with big gestures. A nod, a low word. A recognition that doesn't need proof. In a place like this, everyone knows everyone's face. Sometimes that's comforting. Sometimes it's exhausting. It depends on the day. Over time, this became normal. The village learns a tempo, and the people move inside it like they've been doing it all their lives, because they have. The light grows slowly, not like a switch, but like a curtain being lifted inch by inch. Damp thatch begins to show its texture. The puddles in the lane catch pale reflections. Smoke from the chimneys turns from black to grey as fires settle into a steady burn. Inside one house, a wooden bowl is set on the table. The table is scarred, darkened by years of scrubbing and cutting and spilled broth. Hands move over it like it's part of the body. A spoon taps against the side of the bowl. You hear the soft scrape as someone eats without hurry. Not because they have time, but because they know rushing doesn't make the food warmer or the day easier. A child's feet patter across a floor, then pause. There's a hush, the way children sometimes become quiet when they sense the mood of the room. Someone murmurs a warning, gentle but firm. The child slows. The day begins teaching its lessons early. The smell of bread is rare enough to notice when it appears. If a household has flour to spare, and if the oven is ready, and if the person doing the baking has the strength, then that smell can drift out and settle in the lane like a small kindness. More often, the morning smells are simpler: porridge, damp wool, smoke, and the sharp, clean scent of cold water. The village has a way of sharing without making it a performance. A neighbor hands over a pinch of salt. Another returns a borrowed pot. Someone leaves a small bundle of kindling by a door, not announcing it. It isn't charity, it's survival with manners. You might notice how little privacy exists here. Even with doors shut, you hear life. The laugh of a woman not quite stifled, the cough of an old man, the thump of a stool moved aside, the gentle argument of two people who have argued the same way before and will again. The village doesn't pretend everyone is harmonious. It just keeps moving. For a time, you stand near the well again and listen. Water is being drawn, one bucket after another. The sound is steady enough to calm you. Rope sliding, wood creaking. A soft splash. The bucket set down, the water poured. A trove filling. Animals drinking. It's a loop that will repeat all day, and then repeat again tomorrow. The truth is, a medieval day is built from these loops. Not from headlines. Not from grand turning points. From the same actions done carefully, because the cost of carelessness is felt later, in hunger, in cold, in tools that break when you need them most. The sun finally begins to show itself, not as a bright thing, but as a change in the air. You feel it more than you see it at first. The chill eases around the edges. The smoke rises straighter. The village looks less like a shadow and more like a place with weight and texture. And now the work that cannot be delayed starts to gather. Someone shoulders a hoe. Someone checks a yoke. Someone runs a hand over the flank of an ox, calm and steady, as if both of them understand the day ahead. The fields are waiting, and so is the manor's expectation. Even the church has its quiet claim on time. Still, nothing is loud yet. It's early. The village is only halfway awake. You stay with the small sounds. The scrape of a wooden door. The soft thud of a pail set down. The low murmur of voices. The distant thin bell. The faint creak of a cart being pulled into position. Meanwhile, life carried on quietly, and you can feel yourself settling into its pace, the way you settle into breathing when nobody is asking you to be anywhere else. The village doesn't hurry you. It simply keeps going, one slow, steady motion after another, until morning becomes day. The village is brighter now, but it still feels half asleep in its habits. Light spreads slowly over the thatch, catching the wet tips of straw and turning them pale. The lane shows its true colors, which is mostly brown in a dozen small shades. A puddle reflects the sky like a dull coin. A patch of gravel near one doorway crunches underfoot, a sound that seems too sharp for how quiet everything else is. Smoke keeps rising in thin ropes. It doesn't billow or claim attention. It simply marks that someone is awake enough to keep a fire going. The smell is steady, a mix of old soot and fresh kindling, and it hangs low in the air until a faint breeze carries it off toward the fields. You move along the lane at the same unhurried pace as everyone else. Nobody here treats morning like a race. The work is too long for that. It starts early, it ends late, and it returns the next day with the same calm insistence. A person can only do so much with speed. What carries a household through a season is steadiness. Near one house, a woman steps out and shakes a cloth. Dust lifts into the air, soft and grey, then settles again. The motion is practiced, almost gentle, as if she's shaking the night out of it. The fabric snaps once, then quiets. She folds it without looking, hands moving as if they know a map the eyes don't need. A child appears in the doorway behind her. Bare feet, hair flattened from sleep, a face still caught between dream and day. The child pauses, taking in the cold, then pulls back for a moment as if the air itself has weight. A hand reaches down from inside and sets something on the child's shoulders, a small cloak or shawl that looks too big but will do. The child's shoulders lift and settle under it, and the day begins to hold them. For a while, the village is made of these quiet exchanges. A pot passed from one hand to another. A strap tightened for someone who can't quite reach. A word spoken low and close, not meant to travel. There is a kind of tenderness that doesn't announce itself. It lives in the way people move around each other without colliding, in the way they know when to step aside, when to lend a hand, when to leave someone alone. The well stays busy. You hear the bucket before you see it, the rope sliding over the wooden beam with a dry, familiar scrape. Someone's hands are red from cold. They rub their palms together once, then grip the rope again. The water comes up heavy and dark, and for a moment it looks like a piece of night lifted into the morning. It pours into a pail with a clean splash, and the sound feels like it cuts through everything else, bright and simple. Nearby, a trough is filling. A cow lowers its head and drinks with slow confidence. You hear the steady pull of water and the small drip that escapes and falls back into the mud. The cow's breath is warm and damp, and it steams in the air. A fly, confused by the season, lands and then lifts off again. Life here is never fully tidy. It just keeps going. A man crosses the lane with a tool slung over his shoulder. The handle is polished where his hand always grips it. His boots are already dark with wet earth. He steps around a puddle without thinking, as if his body has memorized every low spot in the village. He doesn't look up much. His eyes are on the ground, on the gate ahead, on the small jobs stacked in his mind like stones. Over time, this became normal. The way you stop noticing the weight of your own coat after you've worn it long enough. Behind one fence, a pig is finally fully awake and unhappy about it. It shuffles in the straw and snorts, pushing at the wooden rails with its shoulder. The rails creak. The pig's noise is blunt and honest, like it has no interest in being polite. Someone answers it with a soft, scolding sound, not angry, just tired. The pig quiets for a moment, then starts again. The village accepts this as it accepts everything else, as part of the soundscape of living. In another yard, a chicken scratches at the ground, quick and focused. You hear the tiny taps of its claws and the faint rustle of dry leaves. It pauses, tilts its head, and then pecks once. It finds something worth swallowing, and goes back to work. The day is full of small hungers. The churchyard remains calm, even as the rest of the village thickens with motion. The stone walls of the church still hold their cold. The door is shut, but you can feel the presence behind it, the quiet claim on time and attention. Not everyone will enter today, but the building sits there like a steady thought. The bell is silent now, and its silence feels deliberate, like it has already done what it needed to do. Beyond the last houses, the fields wait with their familiar bluntness. The soil is dark and uneven, and it smells rich in a way that is both promising and demanding. A faint wind moves over it, lifting the smell of earth and carrying it back toward the lane. It mixes with smoke and animal warmth, and the village breathes it in without comment. You can hear the first heavy movement of a cart being shifted. Wood groans against wood. A wheel turns and complains, then finds its rhythm. Someone mutters under their breath, not for anyone else, just to themselves, as if words help the body do what it's already doing. The cart's axle squeaks. It squeaks again. Nobody fixes it right now. The day has other priorities. A gate opens with a long, aching creak, and the sound travels down the lane. For a moment it feels too loud, then it fades into everything else. The person opening it doesn't flinch. They've heard that gate 1,000 times. It is simply the sound of morning work. Meanwhile, inside the houses, breakfast takes shape in whatever form the household can manage. A bowl scraped clean, a crust of bread shared, a spoonful of something warm. The smell of porridge lingers in the air, soft and plain. It doesn't inspire poetry. It inspires endurance. There is a moment, often, when the morning is fully awake but the day has not yet started pushing. A small pocket of time when people stand in doorways and look at the lane and decide where to place themselves. It isn't idleness. It's orientation. A steady breath before the long stretch. A woman stands with her hands on her hips, not dramatic, just settling her shoulders. She looks toward the fields, then toward the yard, then back inside. She doesn't call out. She doesn't need to. A child emerges now with a small bundle in their arms. Not heavy, but important. The child holds it carefully and steps as if each footfall matters. The bundle might be eggs, wrapped in straw. It might be cloth that needs mending. Whatever it is, it has a purpose, and the child's careful steps feel like a lesson being learned without a lecture. What people rarely noticed was how many of these lessons happened before the sun was even fully up. How to carry without spilling. How to keep quiet when someone is still sleeping. How to read a face and know whether to speak. How to keep your hands busy when your thoughts want to wander. The lane grows busier, but it never becomes loud in the way a city street does. Voices stay low. The village has a habit of saving sound, as if too much noise might waste something. You hear brief exchanges, a few words here and there, names, small instructions, a quick warning about a loose board, a reminder that the bread must be watched. The sounds are simple, not meant to travel far. A man and a woman pass each other near the well. Their shoulders almost brush. One shifts slightly to make space. No apology, no fuss. The movement is polite in the most practical way. Space is limited, and everyone knows it. A dog follows them for a moment, then stops and turns back, as if remembering it left something undone. Its ears twitch. It listens to a sound the humans ignore. Maybe a mouse in the hedge, maybe nothing. It pads away, and its paws make a soft, rhythmic tap where the lane is firmer. The village begins to sort itself. Some people drift toward the fields with tools and baskets. Others remain in yards, tending animals, washing, mending, splitting wood. A few head toward the place where the craft work happens, where someone shapes leather or repairs a tool, or turns a piece of wood into something useful. The village has no signposts for these roles. It has memory. Everyone knows who makes what, who can fix what, who owes whom a favor, who will lend a hand without being asked, who will only do it if the price is right. And yet, even that feels less harsh than it sounds. It's simply the shape of survival. People learn each other's edges. They adjust. They continue. A woman kneels near a doorway and scrubs a wooden bowl. You hear the rough scrape, the sound of water and grit. The bowl turns in her hands, and her thumbs press into the grain of the wood. The water in the basin is already cloudy. She pours some out and adds fresh from the pail. It splashes and runs in thin streams across the packed earth. The village floor drinks it in. If you follow the sound, you hear other small tasks layered together. A knife taps against a chopping block. Cloth is shaken out. A broom made of stiff twigs whispers across the ground. A small hammer strikes once, then pauses, then strikes again. Each sound is separate, and together they make a calm, steady pulse. The truth is, a medieval village isn't quiet because nothing happens. It's quiet because everything happens in small pieces. Toward the edge of the village, an older man stands near a fence and checks the knots. His fingers move slowly, but they are sure. He pulls one rope tight, then tugs another. The rope is rough and frayed in places, and it bites into his skin. He doesn't react. He's felt worse. He tests the fence the way a person tests a truth they've learned to rely on. It holds. A younger man waits nearby with a bundle of stakes. The stakes are uneven, still smelling of fresh, cut wood. The younger man's shoulders are set in that way young shoulders are when they want to look ready. The older man finally nods. They move together. Not as teacher and student, not like that, but as two people who share a job and understand that one has done it longer. The fence will be mended. The animals will be kept in. The day will move forward without a dramatic moment. Over time, this became normal too. Work shared, work passed on. The same motions taught through repetition. On a small patch of ground near a house, a woman bends and checks herbs drying on a rack. The smell is faint but present, sharp and green. She touches one sprig, then another, as if reading them. Some will be for cooking, some for soothing a cough. Some for nothing more than making the air inside a house feel less stale. In a place where the same walls hold the same smoke, a clean smell can feel like a luxury. Not far from her, a boy carries a small bundle of rushes. The rushes are stiff and pale, and they scratch against his arms. He holds them close, and his face is set with the seriousness of a small task done well. He disappears into a doorway. Later, those rushes will be spread on the floor, and the room will feel a little less hard underfoot. Nothing here changes quickly. Comfort is built in thin layers. A faint breeze moves through the lane. You hear it catch the thatch and slide along it. It lifts a loose bit of straw and carries it a short distance before dropping it. The straw falls into a puddle and floats for a moment, then settles. The village does not care. The village has seen worse. Somewhere a woman laughs. It's a small laugh, quick and contained, like she surprised herself with it. Someone answers with a sound that might be amusement, might be a mild complaint. Their voices are low, but the warmth in them is clear. This too is part of the day. Not joy as a performance, just a small human release. Meanwhile, a different kind of sound begins near a yard where a man is splitting wood. The axe rises and falls with a steady thud. Not fast, not dramatic, just consistent. Each strike is followed by a brief pause, a small adjustment. The wood cracks, and the scent of fresh split fibers rises sharp and clean. The man stacks the pieces neatly, as if order in one corner of life can make the rest feel manageable. A woman passes him carrying a basket. The basket is lined with cloth. Inside, you catch a glimpse of something pale. Eggs. She keeps the basket steady, arms slightly tense, careful not to jostle. The eggs are small, not the smooth uniform kind you might imagine. They're real, uneven, speckled, each one a quiet result of feeding and tending and waiting. The basket will likely go toward the market later, or it will be traded quietly within the village. A few eggs for a pinch of salt. Eggs for a bit of candle wax. Eggs for a small favor owed. Money exists, but it doesn't always move through hands here. Often it is goods and labor, measured by what the body can produce and what the household can spare. There is a smell of soreness near one doorway, where a bucket of yesterday's scraps sits. It's not pleasant, but it's familiar. Scraps will go to animals. Nothing is wasted if it can be turned into another form of usefulness. Even the unpleasant smells have a role. The day keeps unfolding, and the village begins to show its quiet layers. A place where people sleep, a place where animals sleep, a place where work happens, a place where the church holds its own kind of time. The manor beyond the fields is still a presence, a steady pressure that shapes choices. And beyond that, the wider world exists. But it does not intrude every minute. News travels slowly. Changes arrive like weather, often after they've already happened elsewhere. For a moment, you can hear something that feels almost like music, but it isn't meant to be. It's the sound of weaving from inside a house. The steady pull and release, the soft tap of wood. The rhythm is soothing, as if the work itself is trying to calm the hands that do it. Cloth is not just cloth here. It is warmth. It is protection. It is something that can be traded for what the household lacks. A woman at a threshold holds a piece of fabric up to the light, squinting slightly. She runs her fingers over it, checking for weak spots. Her hands know cloth the way a sailor knows rope. Not through theory, but through years of touch. She finds a frayed edge and pinches it between thumb and forefinger. Later, she will mend it. Later is always full in a village. The lane continues to carry sound. Not loud sound. The kind that settles into your mind and stays there like a lull. Footsteps. A pail set down. A gate creaking. An animal shifting. A few low words. The scrape of a broom. The dull thud of an axe. The thin hiss of air when someone blows gently into a struggling fire. For a while this worked. And it worked so well that it became invisible. People did not wake each day thinking about the miracle of a village functioning. They woke thinking about whether the water would be enough, whether the grain would last, whether the roof would hold, whether the child's cough would fade. The village held their lives the way a worn blanket holds warmth. Not perfectly, but enough. As the morning moves toward full day, the first line of people begins to drift toward the fields with clearer purpose. They carry tools that look heavy even when they're not. A hoe, a spade, a sickle, each one shaped by the work it will do. Iron is valuable. Wood is precious. A tool is not an object. It is time saved, hunger delayed, survival made slightly more likely. Oxen are yoked with slow care. The yoke settles across broad shoulders, and you hear leather straps being tightened, the soft creak as they pull snug. The animals do not fight it. They stand patient in the way animals become patient when life has always been this. A hand pats a flank, not in affection exactly, but in communication. The ox shifts its weight, accepts the pressure, breathes out. The smell around the animals is strong now, warm and earthy, mixed with the sharper tang of leather and the faint metallic scent of iron fittings. It's the smell of work beginning. A boy runs a short distance. then slows when he remembers he's carrying something. You hear the quickened breath, the small stumble corrected, then the careful steps again. He has a coil of rope. Rope matters. Rope breaks at the wrong time and something falls. Something escapes, something is lost. He holds it like it has weight beyond its size. A woman adjusts her shawl and steps toward the edge of the lane. She pauses and looks back at the house behind her. Not with longing, not with drama, just checking. The doorway is empty. The hearth is safe. The child left inside is settled. She turns and goes on. You might notice that nobody announces the start of the workday. There is no horn, no shouted order. The village is not an army. It begins by accumulation. One person moves, then another, and suddenly the lane has a direction. The church bell does not ring again yet. Its silence feels like a choice. The church will call when it needs to, but the morning belongs to hunger and land. As the field workers leave, others remain. Someone stays behind with the youngest children. Someone stays with an older parent whose knees ache too much to walk far. Someone stays because their work is here, in a small dark space where a craft lives. A cobbler with leather and awls. A smith whose forge is a rough shelter and a stubborn fire. A potter who knows the feel of clay the way others know the feel of soil. Not all villages have all crafts, but every village has some. The truth is, even ordinary places must make and mend. Things break. Clothes tear. Tools dull. The world is rough on everything. In one corner of the village you hear a deeper sound now. The first strike of iron being tested. Not the full ringing of a busy forge, just a single tap. A check. A small act of attention. The sound is clean, and it echoes faintly between walls before disappearing. Someone is awake enough to handle heat and metal. That already tells you something about the day's seriousness. At a doorway nearby, a woman lifts a wooden lid from a pot. Steam rises and curls into the air, thin and pale. The smell is simple. Greens. Onion if they have it. A hint of fat if there is any to spare. She stirs with a wooden spoon, and the spoon scrapes the pot with a familiar sound. She tastes without ceremony, then adds a pinch of something from a cloth pouch. Salt if they're lucky. Herbs if they're not. The pot goes back on the heat. The lid settles with a soft knock. Meanwhile, the lane quiets a little as people leave. Not empty, just less crowded. The puddles sit undisturbed. The dog circles once, then lies down in a spot where the sun has finally reached the ground. It sighs and closes its eyes, not fully sleeping, just resting. A small bird lands on a fence rail and shakes its feathers. You hear the tiny rustle, then it hops once, then twice, then flies off. The village barely notices. Nature is not a backdrop here. It is a neighbor. The day is well underway now, but it still carries that morning softness in its sounds. Nothing has become harsh. Nothing has demanded urgency. The village has begun in the only way it knows how, by doing what must be done and keeping its voice low, and as you move with it, the lane begins to feel familiar underfoot, as if it remembers every step and offers the same steady support in return. The work will stretch out ahead, long and plain. The hours will fill themselves. But this beginning stays gentle, built from smoke, water, rope, and the calm agreement that life continues. By now, the village has fully accepted the day. The lane no longer feels like a waiting place. It feels like a working place, the kind that holds footsteps without counting them. The sun is higher, but it doesn't turn everything bright. It just reveals what was already there. Damp patches drying slowly. Footprints pressed into soft earth. The rough weave of a cloak. The crooked line of a fence that has been mended more times than anyone can remember. And still, the sounds stay soft. You hear the village in layers. Close sounds and far sounds, all of them ordinary. A pot being set down, a dog shaking itself, a cartwheel turning somewhere near the edge of the houses, the steady, patient scrape of a broom made from bundled twigs, the low, murmured words between two people who have no reason to raise their voices. If you step closer to a house, you can feel how the warmth gathers near the walls. Not a strong warmth, but a lived-in one. Smoke has soaked into the wood over years, and the place smells like yesterday's fire and last winter's dampness. The scent clings in a way that makes the space feel older than the people inside it. A doorway is a small border here. One step takes you from cold air and muddy lane into dimness and heat held in the bones of the building. Your eyes adjust slowly. Inside, the hearth is the heart of everything. It isn't a fancy hearth, It's a darkened place of stones and ash where fire is treated like something that needs respect. Not romance. Respect. Someone kneels there now, not performing, just tending. They rake ash aside with a stick, then pull a few coals forward. You hear the faint tick of ember against stone. A small breath is blown toward the coals, careful and steady. The ember brightens, then softens, then brightens again. A piece of kindling is placed in, thin and dry, and it catches with a shy crackle. The sound is almost nothing, but it changes the whole room. A pot sits nearby, blackened at the bottom from 100 cookings. It gets nudged closer to the heat. Not all at once. The person tending it knows the temper of fire. A hand hovers over the rim and feels the warmth. Fingers pull back. The pot is moved a little, then left alone. For a while, this worked. A lot of life can be held together by small adjustments like that. The right distance from flame. The right amount of water. The right amount of patience. On a low bench, a bundle of cloth waits. The cloth is not elegant. It's a working cloth, the kind that gets patched and re-patched until it becomes more patched than original. Someone has a needle. You hear the faint prick of it through fabric, the soft pull of thread. It makes a quiet sound, like a tiny sigh each time it tightens. A child is nearby, not fully trusted with big tasks, but not ignored either. The child's fingers pick at a piece of straw, then at the edge of a wooden cup. The child leans closer to the hearth, drawn by warmth, and a gentle hand guides them back without words. No sharp scolding, just a small correction. The village teaches safety the way it teaches everything else, through steady repetition. Outside, the lane continues to carry work. A woman passes with a basket on her hip. The basket is lined with cloth and smells faintly of old grain. Another woman pauses at the well and speaks low to someone already there. Their voices blend with the rope and water sounds, and you don't catch the words clearly. You catch the tone, practical. Familiar. Not secretive, just not meant for strangers. Somewhere close you hear a rhythmic knock that could be a pestle in a mortar. A dull, steady thump. Herbs crushed. Salt mixed with something. A simple paste for cooking, or for soothing an ache, or for nothing more than making a plain meal taste like someone cared. The truth is, care lives in small places. In one yard, a woman kneels over a tub and washes cloth. The water is cold enough that her hands turn red. You hear the fabric being rubbed against itself, rough and determined. She wrings it out with a twist that looks practiced and heavy. Water streams back into the tub, then spills over and runs across the packed ground. The dirt drinks it quickly, leaving a darker patch. She lifts the cloth and shakes it once. It snaps softly, then hangs limp again. She drapes it over a line or a hedge. The cloth sags under its own weight. It will dry slowly. It always does. Nearby, a man splits wood with the steady calm of someone who knows there is no point in rushing. The axe rises. The axe falls. The thud is deep and regular. The wood cracks with a sound like a brief sigh, and the fresh scent of split fiber lifts into the air. It smells clean, almost sweet, and it stands out against smoke and dampness. He stacks the pieces neatly. Not because he loves order for its own sake, but because stacked wood stays drier, and dry wood makes better fire, and better fire makes better food, and better food keeps people upright. Each step leads to another, plain and connected. Over time, this became normal, the way the mind learns to see a chain of needs without calling it a chain. Inside another house, you hear something heavier. Duff being worked. Not kneaded with delicate motions, but pressed and folded with the whole weight of hands and wrists. A wooden bowl sits on a table, and the table complains softly under the effort. The smell here is faintly sour, the smell of old yeast living in a lump of starter kept alive like a small household animal. Bread is never just bread in a place like this. It's time, it's planning, it's the slow turning of grain into something that can be carried, shared, traded, stored. Someone brings out a handful of flour, careful with it, and you can tell from the way they pinch it that they know the cost. The dough sticks slightly. Hands dust flour, then fold again. The motions are steady enough to be soothing. Press. Told. Press. A rhythm that doesn't need words. The person working the dough breathes through it, shoulders relaxed in the way they only get when they're doing something they've done 1,000 times. A small oven sits nearby or outside, a clay dome darkened by smoke. If it's a communal oven, it will see many hands today, each bringing their own loaf marked with a simple sign so it can be recognized later. If it's a household oven, it is still a shared tool in spirit. People trade fuel, trade labor, trade time watching the fire. The fire for baking is different. Hotter, more demanding. The kind that makes your face feel tight when you lean too close. Someone tests the heat with a practiced glance, then by holding a hand near the opening, counting silently in their body. They don't call it counting, They just know. When the time is right, loaves are slid in on a wooden paddle. The smell begins as a promise, then becomes real, filling the air around the oven with warmth that feels almost generous. Even if the loaf is small, even if the flour is coarse, that smell has a way of easing people's shoulders. Meanwhile, the village keeps its quiet conversations going. A man stands at the edge of a yard and sharpens a blade. The rasp of metal on stone is slow and patient. Another man checks a harness strap, fingers working leather with the certainty of habit. A woman holds a child's sleeve and patches a tear with thread that doesn't quite match. No one makes a speech about making do. They simply do it. The manners pull still exists, but you feel it differently now, not as a looming thing, but as a steady undercurrent. Some people are in the fields, working not only for their own households, but for obligations owed. Their labor is counted somewhere, even if it isn't counted kindly. Still, the village does not collapse under that weight. It bends around it, like grass around a stone. What people rarely noticed was how much of village life happened inside the homes, quietly, while others were out under the open sky. The village is not only fields and fences. It is also hearths and bowls and hands that mend. In one house, someone scrapes a bowl clean and pours the thin leftover into a smaller cup. Nothing is wasted. Even the last bit of broth matters. A dog watches from the corner, ears alert, eyes patient. The dog does not beg loudly. It simply waits, knowing scraps will come when they come. A woman takes a small clay jar and opens it. You hear the faint suction, then the soft clink of the lid against the table. The smell that rises is sharp, fermented. Pickled vegetables or preserved fruit, something meant to survive the long stretch between fresh foods. She takes a small portion, not greedy, not hesitant, just measured. The jar is closed again carefully. The lid is pressed down, then tied. There is a kind of discipline in these motions. Not strictness. Survival discipline. The body learns that hunger is easier when you plan. The mind learns that small comforts are worth protecting. The lane outside has changed too. It is no longer only morning movement, it's midday organization. Some yards are quieter now as workers have gone to the fields. Others are louder with domestic work. You hear the steady slosh of washing. The creak of a spinning wheel in a house where someone turns wool into thread. The soft whir and pause as if the house itself is breathing. The spinning wheel's sound is gentle. It isn't music, but it has a rhythm that feels like one. You can hear the twist of fiber, the slight squeak of wood, the quiet tap when the spinner adjusts their foot. Wool runs through fingers, and you can almost feel its texture from the sound alone. Slightly oily, slightly scratchy, warm when it's finally woven. Cloth is made here the slow way, and it changes everything. A warm tunic, a patched cloak, a blanket thick enough to hold in heat. These things are not style. They are a barrier between a body and winter. A woman steps outside with a bundle of wool slung over her arm. She shakes it gently, and the fibers loosen. A few bits of straw fall out. She picks through it with quick, practiced motions. The wool smells faintly of animal, faintly of lanolin, faintly of smoke from the house. It's the smell of the village itself. She sits on a low stool near the door, where there is light enough to see. The light isn't bright, but it's honest. She begins to card the wool, pulling it between rough tools that tease the fibers straight. The sound is a soft rasp, like dry grass against wood. She doesn't look up much. Her eyes are on her hands, and her hands are on the wool, and the work holds her in a quiet focus. Meanwhile, someone else has a different kind of work. In a shaded corner, a man leans over a piece of leather. He punctures it with an awl. You hear the small pop as the tool goes through. He threads a strap, pulls it tight, and the leather creaks. The smell is rich and earthy, mixed with fat used to soften it. Leather becomes shoes, belts, harness parts, small pouches for salt or coins. Each stitch is a promise that something will hold together for a while longer. The man's fingers are strong and stained, and they move without hesitation. No one here talks about craftsmanship like it's art. It's necessity done well. A brief breeze moves through the lane and brings new smells. From one house, the sweetness of bread finishing. From another, the sharpness of onions in a pot. From the yards, animal warmth and damp straw. From the churchyard, moss and cold stone. All of it blends until it becomes the scent of a place that's alive. For a moment, you hear laughter again, quieter than the work sounds, like someone let it slip out while their hands were busy. It doesn't last long, it doesn't need to. It's enough to remind you the day is not only labor, it's also people. A young boy runs a few steps, then remembers himself and slows. His feet slap softly on packed earth. He carries something small, a message or a tool, and he tries to look serious about it. When he passes an older woman, She reaches out and smooths his hair without stopping her own work. The gesture is so quick it could be missed. But it lands like warmth. Over time, this became normal too. Touch given without announcement. Small reassurance folded into the day. Inside another home, someone is dealing with ash. Ash is not just waste. It's used for cleaning. It's used for making a rough soap. Someone scoops it into a container, careful not to stir it too much. The finest ash drifts in the air and makes the sunbeam look thicker. The person coughs once, softly, then continues. A kettle is lifted from the hearth with a cloth wrapped around the handle. The metal is hot. The cloth is thin. The person's grip is firm anyway. Water is poured into a basin, and steam rises with a gentle hiss. That steam carries the smell of heated iron, a scent that's oddly clean. Hands are washed. Not ceremoniously. Just enough to keep grime from becoming infection. Enough to keep food from tasting too much like dirt. A face is wiped with a damp cloth. A child's hands are rubbed clean, grudgingly at first, then with a small sigh of acceptance. These are small acts that keep a household from falling apart. In a village, survival is made of the unremarkable. Outside, a neighbor leans on a fence and speaks to someone across the lane. The conversation is brief, a reminder about a tool, a note about a stray animal, a small piece of news from the road. Their voices are low, and even from here you can tell they aren't trying to stir anything up. News is just another thing to carry, like water or wood. The road beyond the village is present in its absence. It's there, leading away, connecting to the market town, to other villages, to the wider world. But the village doesn't live on the road's schedule. It lives on the sun, on the soil, on what the household can manage before night returns. In one yard, a girl sorts peas or beans into a small wooden bowl. The sound is soft, a faint tapping as the dried pods are cracked open. Her fingers move quickly, and you can tell she's done this many times. She doesn't sigh dramatically. She doesn't complain loudly. She simply works because the work is part of being here. A small pile grows in the bowl. Each bean is a tiny promise of food later. The girl's hands are steady. Her attention is calm. She is learning patience without being told she's learning it. The truth is, a village doesn't only raise crops and animals, it raises people, slowly, through repetition, through tasks that feel endless, until one day the child is the adult doing them without thinking. In a shaded doorway, an older man sits and mends a fishing net or a simple rope. His fingers move with the slow certainty of someone whose eyes are not as sharp as they once were, but whose hands still know the work. He pulls a knot tight, then checks it with a tug. The rope holds. He nods to himself, satisfied. The rhythm of domestic work continues, the spinning wheel, the scrape of a spoon, the quiet bubbling of a pot, the occasional clink of pottery, the soft, thick sound of bread being turned out onto a cloth. When the loaf comes free, it makes a dull, comforting thump. Someone taps the bottom of the loaf, listening. The sound is hollow enough to please them. They don't smile widely. They simply set it aside and move on. There is always something next. A piece of bread is torn off and handed to a child. The bread is still warm enough to steam when it's pulled apart. The child holds it carefully, as if it could be dropped like an egg. The child takes a bite, chewing slowly. No chatter. Just the quiet concentration of eating. The smell of baked crust spreads into the lane. A neighbor catches it and turns their head slightly. Not jealous exactly, just noticing. A smell like that has a way of making people remember better days and hope for more. For a while, the village feels almost gentle, and yet there is always the edge of practicality. The bread must last. The flour must not run out. The woodpile must be built back up. The water must be drawn again. Even the most comforting smell is tied to a calculation. What's easy to forget is that comfort here is never taken for granted. It is noticed, but quietly, and then folded back into work. A woman takes a slice of bread and dips it into a pot. The broth is thin but warm. She eats standing because sitting would feel like time she can't spare. Still, her chewing is slow. Her shoulders loosen. For a moment, the warmth reaches her hands and face and makes her look softer. She hears something outside and steps to the doorway. A neighbor is there holding a small bundle of herbs, green and slightly wilted. The exchange is quick. A nod, a hand, to hand pass, no ceremony. The herbs will go into the pot later. They will make it taste less like nothing. Over time, this became normal too. Small trades that keep life from feeling too bare. As the day continues to build, the houses begin to breathe heat. The air inside becomes warmer, heavier with smoke and steam. The smell of cooking settles into cloth. The lane outside becomes a place to escape the thick air for a moment, to take a breath that feels cooler and cleaner. A child steps out and stretches, arms lifted, then drops them again. The child looks toward the field path, as if thinking about where the others went. The field path is quiet now, empty of the morning's line of workers. Those workers are out there, bending and pulling and sweating, while the village itself continues its second kind of work here at home. The church bell does not ring right now. Its silence feels restful. The church holds time, but it does not fill every moment. The village already has enough rhythms. You stay with the household sounds. The scrape of a bench moved aside, the creak of a door hinge, the faint drip of water from a pail that wasn't set down carefully enough, the low murmur of a lullaby hummed under someone's breath, not for performance, just to keep a child calm. Even the cynicism that sometimes lives in people's mouths feels gentle here. A muttered complaint about the manor, a dry remark about the weather, a small joke about a neighbor's stubborn goat. The humor isn't loud, it's survival humor. It keeps bitterness from rooting too deep. Meanwhile, a woman checks a small wooden chest. Inside are the household's modest treasures. A bit of thread saved for later, a small piece of wax, a handful of dried herbs, a coin or two if the household is lucky. The chest is not locked with a grand key. It is hidden or watched, protected by the simple fact that everyone knows everyone, and theft has consequences that outlast a single day. She takes out a small object, then puts it back. Not needed yet. She closes the chest and presses the lid down as if sealing a promise. The truth is, so much of village life is about not using things until you must, saving, waiting, stretching what you have. The lane outside changes again as midday approaches. Shadows shorten, the damp patches dry, dust rises where feet pass. The smell of smoke shifts as fires settle. Dogs find patches of sun and lie down. Chickens move like busy little clocks, pecking and scratching, never fully satisfied. And through it all, the homes keep doing their quiet work. Dough turned into bread. Wool turned into thread. Ash turned into cleaning. Water turned into soup. Small repairs that keep the day from unraveling. You can feel how a village survives not by being dramatic, but by being stubborn. Not loud stubbornness. Just the steady refusal to stop. A woman steps into the lane with a loaf wrapped in cloth. She carries it carefully close to her body, as if keeping its warmth matters. She walks toward the communal oven area, or toward a neighbor's house. And you can tell she's going to share a piece, trade a piece, or bring a piece to someone who cannot come to her. Her pace is even. Her eyes are calm. She does not look like a hero. She looks like someone living. For a while you stay with her movement. And the loaf smell travels with her, gentle and grounding. And as the village continues to hum at this quiet midday pitch, you find that you can settle into it too, letting the small domestic sounds carry you forward. The way a slow fire carries heat through a room, without anyone needing to talk about it. The village begins to thin out in a particular way as midday settles in. Not empty, just redistributed. The lane still holds movement, but it's mostly the kind that stays close to doors and fences. The deeper pull of the day is out beyond the last houses, where the path narrows and the field grass starts to brush your ankles. That path feels different from the lane. The lane is shared space, full of small interruptions and familiar voices. The field path is quieter and more deliberate. The sound changes underfoot, less squelch, more soft crush of grass and dry stalks. You hear insects now, not in a lively chorus, but in that steady background way, as if they've been working all along and you're only just noticing. A few people move ahead of you, spaced out in a way that makes the walk feel calmer. They aren't strolling. They're conserving energy. Tools rest on shoulders. A bundle of rope hangs from a belt. Someone carries a small sack that knocks lightly against their leg with each step. The rhythm of walking becomes its own kind of lull, the body finding a pace that can be kept for hours without making the heart race. The air out here has more space. Smoke still reaches you, but it's thinner, mixed with the smell of warm soil and crushed green. When the breeze shifts, it brings the scent of manure from a distant patch where animals were kept, and then it moves on again, as if the wind itself has learned not to linger. For a while, this worked. The simple plan of leaving the village behind for a stretch of time, and returning only when the hands are too tired to keep going. You start to hear the work before you fully see it. A metal edge biting into earth. A dull thud as a clod breaks. The faint scrape of a hoe being pulled through weeds. These aren't sharp sounds. They're heavy ones, softened by distance and open air. They come and go as the wind carries them, and in between there is the quiet, steady breath of the fields. The fields don't look tidy, not in the way someone might expect if they think of farming as neat rows and clean lines. Medieval fields are practical, shaped by what the land allows and what the village can manage. Some plots are more cared for than others. Some are stony. Some hold water. Some are so good they make people quietly grateful without saying the words. You step over a shallow ditch where water collects after rain. The mud is darker here, and it holds a coldness that stays even in sun. A small frog jumps away at your approach, a quick wet sound and then stillness again. The ditch doesn't look like much, but it matters. Water must go somewhere. A field that stays too wet can ruin a season. So ditches are dug, cleared, dug again, never finished, always needing attention. A man is bent over in a patch of ground, pulling weeds with a patience that looks almost stubborn. His fingers pinch close to the soil and tug. The weeds come free with a soft tearing sound. He shakes the dirt from the roots with a small flick of his wrist and tosses the weeds into a growing pile. He doesn't look angry. He looks focused. The work is too steady for anger to be useful. Nearby, a woman works with a hoe. The handle is smoothed where hands have held it for years. The blade cuts into the earth with a muted chop, then lifts. Chop, lift, pull back. The sound is rhythmic enough that your mind starts to settle into it. She isn't rushing. Rushing here only makes mistakes, and mistakes cost more than time. Sweat begins quietly. Not dramatic beads, just a slow warmth on the back of the neck, a dampness under the arms. Clothing starts to cling. A cloak that felt useful on the lane is now a weight, so it's loosened or set aside. The sun presses down without cruelty, just persistence. It turns the field into a place where every movement has a price. Over time, this became normal, the daily agreement between body and land. An ox stands not far away, yoked and waiting. Its flanks rise and fall with slow breaths. The animal's ears twitch toward sounds you can't quite place, and it blinks as if it's thinking in its own quiet way. The leather straps on the yoke creak occasionally as the ox shifts its weight. A man rests a hand on the animal's shoulder, not as a tender gesture, but as a steady signal. The ox stands. The man stands. They share the same shade of patience. A plough is there, simple and heavy, wood-worn smooth. Iron edge dulled by use, sharpened again, dulled again. The plough is not a symbol of progress out here. It's a tool with a job, and the job is unforgiving. A furrow is cut, then another. The lines aren't perfect. They don't need to be. They need to be enough. You hear a brief call from one worker to another. Not shouted. Just carried. A name, a short instruction, a warning about a stone. Then silence again. People save their voices. The work takes breath. What's easy to forget is that a lot of village life happens with hardly any talking at all. In a city, you might measure the day by noise. Out here, you measure it by effort. A boy works along the edge of a plot, collecting stones into a basket. The stones are small, but they add up. They always do. Each stone lifted is one less jolt for the plough, one less dulling scrape against iron. The boy's hands get dirty fast. He wipes them on his tunic and keeps going. The basket grows heavier. He adjusts his grip. He doesn't complain loudly. He's learning the plain truth that the land is never fully tamed. A woman in another patch is tying up a bundle of pulled weeds. She wraps a strip of cloth around the stems and pulls it tight. The strip bites into her fingers. She doesn't react. Her hands have long since learned to ignore small pain. She sets the bundle aside to be carried away later, maybe to feed animals, maybe to burn, maybe to compost back into the soil. Even weeds can be turned into something useful if you keep your head. For a while, the field work is only these steady motions, repeated until the mind stops trying to keep track and simply settles into the rhythm. Your body begins to understand why people look tired in villages. Not tired like someone who stayed up too late, but tired like someone who has been doing this for years and will do it again tomorrow. The smell out here is rich and blunt. Earth, green sap sweat, animal warmth, occasionally the sharper scent of crushed onion or garlic from someone's pouch when they shift it. There's also the faint smell of wool and old smoke still clinging to clothes, a reminder that even out in the open, the village follows you. Meanwhile, closer to the village, the domestic work continues in its own steady way. You can almost imagine it from here without seeing it. A pot simmering, a child being kept busy, a spinning wheel turning. Those sounds don't reach the field, but the knowledge of them does. The village runs on 2 tracks at once, and both tracks matter. You notice how people manage their bodies in small ways. They pause before they truly need to. They straighten slowly, not with a sudden stretch. They roll their shoulders once. They wipe their forehead with the back of a wrist. They drink water carefully, not gulping, because water is drawn by hand and carried by hand, and never comes without effort. A clay jug is passed from one person to another. The jug is warm from the sun, and the water inside tastes slightly of clay. Still, it cools the mouth. The sound of drinking is soft, and for a moment, the field feels quieter, as if the land itself is listening. Then the work resumes. There are moments when a cloud passes over the sun, and the temperature shifts just enough to feel like relief. The workers don't cheer. They simply breathe a little easier. When the sun returns, they adjust again. The day is full of these small negotiations. A man kneels and examines a plant, pinching a leaf between his fingers. He looks at the color, the thickness, the way it bends. His face stays calm. This is not the kind of attention that looks like study. It looks like familiarity. He knows what a healthy plant feels like the way he knows what good bread smells like. He lets the leaf go and moves on. The truth is, this kind of knowledge lives in hands and eyes more than in words. In another plot, people are thinning seedlings, pulling some so the rest can grow. It feels cruel in a small way, like choosing which living thing gets a chance. But it's the quiet arithmetic of farming. Too crowded and none thrive, so fingers pinch, pull, set aside. The pulled seedlings might be fed to animals or left to dry. Nothing is wasted if it can be avoided. Over time, this became normal too, these small, unromantic choices made without ceremony. You hear a sudden clatter from the direction of the plough. A stone, larger than expected, has caught the blade. The worker stops immediately. There's a pause, the kind that feels heavy, because it interrupts the rhythm. Then there's movement. A man kneels and digs around the stone with his hands. Dirt scrapes under fingernails. The stone refuses at first, then shifts. It's lifted with a grunt and rolled aside. The plough is checked. The iron edge is examined. A finger runs along it. The man's mouth tightens. Not with anger, but with the tired acceptance that the land always throws something in your way. A small dry remark is made, the kind that carries a gentle cynicism without heat. Someone replies with a short laugh that doesn't last. Then they return to work. The rhythm repairs itself. For a while this is the day. The sun moving. Shadows shortening. The field slowly changing under the hands that work it. At the edge of the plot, a strip of grass separates one family's land from another's. A boundary that is both important and strangely fragile. No stone walls out here. Just memory habit, and a shared understanding that crossing lines causes trouble nobody can afford. People keep to their strips not because they're noble, but because conflict is expensive. Still, you can feel the tension of those boundaries. A hoe swings a little too wide, a footstep's a little too far. Someone notices. A look passes, then the tool shifts back, the footsteps away. No argument, no escalation. Just a quiet correction that keeps the day from soaring. Meanwhile, above and beyond these private lines, there is the larger structure that holds the village. Obligations, dues, labor days owed to the manor. The work done here is not entirely free. Even a person tending their own plot carries the knowledge that some portion of their time belongs elsewhere. This is not spoken constantly. It doesn't need to be. It sits in the back of the mind like a stone in a pocket. You feel it when someone glances toward the manor's direction. You feel it in the way people count their hours without admitting they're counting. A small group of workers in the distance moves in a more coordinated way. They're on the Demazen land, the Lord's fields, doing the labor owed. Their tools rise and fall together. Their bodies bend in the same rhythm. It looks almost peaceful from afar, but up close it's the same strain, the same sweat, the same slow ache that settles into the shoulders. What people rarely noticed was how different a field feels when it is yours versus when it is owed. The soil is the same. The sun is the same. Still the feeling in the chest changes. A man pauses and looks down at his hands. Fingers dark with soil. Nails rimmed with dirt. He flexes them once. Then he grips the hoe again. There's no time for reflection that turns into stillness. Reflection here is a brief glance, then motion again. A bird circles overhead, then lands a short distance away, pecking at insects stirred up by the work. The bird is quick and businesslike. It follows the plough, then hops aside when a boot comes near. The workers barely look at it. It's part of the field's life. It takes what it can from their effort. They don't chase it away. There are bigger things to worry about than a bird. The wind shifts again, bringing a faint smell of bread from the village, diluted by distance. It lands in the mind like a promise, not excitement. Just a quiet marker of time. Midday food will come. Hands will rest for a few minutes. The body will be asked to keep going afterward, but those minutes matter. For a while, the thought of food moves through the workers without being spoken. People are not overly sentimental about meals, but they understand them. Warmth in the stomach is not luxury, it's fuel. When the break finally comes, it comes without a whistle. Tools are set down. A few people straighten slowly, one vertebra at a time. A woman rubs her lower back with the heel of her hand, then lets her arm fall. Someone sits on the ground with a careful sigh. Grass scratches through cloth. The earth's warmth rises into the body. A cloth bundle is opened. Inside is bread, dark and dense, with a crust that holds. Someone breaks off pieces and passes them around. The bread tears with a soft crackle. It smells faintly sour, faintly smoky. It tastes of grain that has been stretched and coaxed into something sustaining. A small piece of cheese might appear. If the household has any, it's not much. It's enough to change the taste of the bread and make the mouth feel less dry. An onion is cut with a small knife and shared. The onion's smell is sharp, and the first bite makes eyes water slightly. Not from emotion, just from the honest strength of it. A jug is passed again. Water tastes warmer now. Still it helps. This is not a long rest. It can't be. There is too much daylight to use, and daylight is the village's most reliable resource. It arrives whether you're ready or not, and it leaves whether you're finished or not. So people eat quickly but not frantically. They chew. They swallow. They wipe their hands on cloth. They wrap up what's left. You hear the small sounds of the break more clearly than you might expect. Bread crust scraping against a calloused thumb. A knife blade tapping lightly on a stone as it's set down. A quiet throat clearing. The faint hum of insects in the grass. Even the silence between bites feels full. For a while, the whole field seems to exhale. Then the tools are lifted again. The first swings after a break are heavier. Muscles remember the ache. The body resists, then yields. A man adjusts his stance, feet planted wider. A woman tightens the cloth around her hair. Someone spits once to clear a dry mouth. Work resumes, and the rhythm returns, slower at first, then steady. Over time, this became normal too, the way the day dips and rises inside itself. In the afternoon, the light changes. It becomes less direct, a little softer. Shadows lengthen. The heat eases in small degrees. The workers don't celebrate. They simply feel the difference in their shoulders. The work continues, but it feels less punishing. A cart appears on the path. It moves slowly, wheels creaking, axle complaining. It carries something that matters: a bundle of tools, a sack of seed, perhaps a load of manure to spread. The cart's arrival shifts the field's sounds. More wood creaks. More harness leather squeaks. You hear the animal pulling it, breath heavy, hooves sinking slightly in softer patches. A man walks beside the cart, hand on the side rail, guiding it around the worst ground. He murmurs to the animal, not as if it understands words, but as if the sound of his voice steadies both of them. The animal's ears flick back toward him, then forward again. They move together. At the cart, a sack is opened, and you smell seed. Dried, dusty, faintly sweet. The seed is poured into a smaller pouch and carried down the furrows. It falls from the hand in a controlled scatter, not thrown, not poured in a rush. Each seed is a future. Even if many fail, enough must succeed. Hands move in a slow, practiced pattern. Step scatter, step scatter. The seed hits soil with almost no sound. Still, you can feel the importance of it in the attention given. Meanwhile, someone follows behind with a simple rake, pulling soil lightly over the scattered seed. The rake's teeth make a soft scratching sound. Soil slides. The scent of earth rises again, fresh and rich. You might notice how the work changes from heavy to fine. Hoeing, hauling, ploughing, then the smaller work of seeding, covering, smoothing. The day isn't one single task. It's a sequence that fits the season, each part leaning on the last. There is no talk of the season as a concept out here. There is only what must be done now, before the weather shifts, before the light shortens, before rain returns. People carry the calendar in their bodies. They feel it in the soil's moisture, in the wind's edge, in the way the sun sits in the sky. A brief gust comes through and lifts dust from a dry patch. The dust swirls around ankles and settles on skin. Someone coughs once softly. A sleeve wipes a mouth. Work continues. Dust is just another thing the day gives you. In the distance, you hear a bell from the church, faint and thin across the fields. Not loud, not commanding. More like a gentle tapping on the edge of the mind. It marks a time that matters to the village, even for those who cannot stop to answer it. Some people pause, just for a breath. A hand stills. A head dips slightly. Then the hand moves again. The day does not stop fully for ritual. It absorbs ritual into the work. The manner's presence returns in small ways as afternoon deepens. A rider passes on the farther road. The sound of hooves quick on firmer ground. The rider doesn't stop. The rider doesn't speak to the workers. Still, the sight of that movement pulls a thread in the mind. Someone watches until the rider is out of view. Then they look back down at their own patch of earth and continue. The truth is, power in a village is often felt more than it is seen. As the sun begins to tilt toward evening, a different kind of tiredness arrives. It isn't sharp. It's a slow drag behind the eyes. Arms feel heavier, not because the tool has changed, but because the muscles have given so much already. People adjust by doing what they can in smaller bursts. A few strikes, a pause. A few steps, a pause. It's not laziness. It's pacing. A woman sets her hoe down and rubs her palms. The skin is rough, with small cracks. She runs her thumb along a split and presses it closed, as if that could make it heal faster. Then she picks up the tool again. The split will heal when it can. The weeds will not wait. What people rarely noticed was how much endurance is built this way, not by heroic effort, but by refusal to quit before the light is gone. Eventually, there's a moment when someone decides the work has reached a stopping point for today. Not finished. It's never finished. Just stopped. Tools are gathered. The cart is turned back toward the village. The ox is unyoked, straps loosened with slow care. The animal shakes its head once, relieved, and you hear the leather creak as it shifts. The workers begin the walk back. The path feels different under tired feet. Each step is heavier. The grass brushes ankles the same way, but the body notices it more. The breeze feels cooler now, and it finds the sweat on skin and makes a faint chill. People pull shawls back around shoulders. They tighten belts. They adjust loads so they don't swing. The village appears ahead, not as an exciting sight, but as a place where the day can be set down for a while. Smoke is still rising. The smell of cooking is stronger now. You hear the faint noise of the lane again, the domestic sounds growing clearer as you approach. A dog barks once, more greeting than alarm. Chickens cluck in the yards, gathering themselves for the shift toward evening. For a while, the field work continues in the body even as the feet reach the lane. Shoulders still feel the weight of tools. Hands still feel the handle's shape. The mind still holds the furrows and stones and weeds. Over time, this became normal too. Carrying the field into the home and carrying the home back into the field, day after day. As the workers drift into their yards, and through their doorways, the village gathers itself again. The lane becomes a meeting place for brief exchanges. A nod to someone returning, a short remark about the soil, a dry comment about a stubborn ox, a quiet laugh that fades quickly, and the day is not over. Not yet. The evening has its own work waiting, closer to the hearth, closer to water and bread, closer to the small repairs that keep tomorrow from falling apart. The light softens, the air cools, and the village takes in its field, worn people without ceremony, letting them fold back into the steady hum of home. Evening does not arrive like a door closing. It seeps in, it changes the air first. The warmth that sat on the fields all day begins to lift away, and the breeze carries a cooler edge that finds skin still damp from work. You feel it at the back of the neck, along the wrists, where cloth has rubbed all day and left the body slightly tender. Back in the village, the lane receives people the way it receives everything else. Without ceremony. Tired feet press into ground that has been walked since dawn. Mud that dried in the midday sun begins to soften again as the air cools. A cartwheel groans as it turns into a yard, and you can hear the axle complain like it always does, stubborn and unfixed. People come in slowly, not because they're trying to be dramatic, but because the body moves carefully when it has to keep moving tomorrow. Tools are carried in a way that protects shoulders. Bundles are shifted from one hand to the other with small pauses, like the hands are negotiating with themselves. Nobody is sprinting down the lane. Nobody is showing off. There's nothing to prove here, only the quiet need to finish the day without breaking. For a while, this worked. You return from the fields and you become a village person again. Not a field worker, not a body bent over soil, but a body that belongs near a doorway and a hearth. The first thing many people do is drift toward water. Even if they don't go straight to the well, their attention goes there. Water is the hinge the evening turns on. It's needed for cooking, for washing hands and faces, for animals settling in, for the simple comfort of rinsing dust from the mouth. At the well, the sounds gather again. Rope sliding, bucket tapping stone. A soft splash from deep below. There's a rhythm to it that feels older than any person standing there. One bucket up, one bucket down. The beam creaks gently like a tired shoulder. A woman stands with a pail, shifting her weight from foot to foot. Her shoulders are lower than they were in the morning. The day has pressed them down. She waits without impatience. Waiting is normal here. When her turn comes, she grips the rope and pulls with the calm effort of someone who knows exactly how much strength to spend. The bucket rises heavy and dark. She tips it into her pail. Water rushes and then settles. The sound is simple, clean, and for a moment it feels like the most honest sound in the village. Another person steps forward. A man with dirt still caked around his fingernails. His hands are big and slow, not clumsy, just worn. He draws water with a steady pull, then sets the bucket down for a moment to rest his fingers. He doesn't look at the sky. He doesn't need to. The light tells him everything. Evening is arriving, and that means the work changes, not ends. Over time, this became normal. The well becomes a meeting point for a different kind of conversation. Not the day's gossip, not big news, but the small practical things that need sharing. A reminder that a fence post is loose. A note that the path by the ditch is slick. A quick comment about someone's ox favoring one leg. These words are carried like tools, handed over and used. The voices stay low. Even tired people don't raise their voices much here. Not out of politeness exactly. Out of habit. The village has learned that loudness rarely fixes anything. A child appears near the well with a smaller jug. The jug looks too heavy for the child's arms, so the child holds it tight against the chest. The child waits, eyes focused, lips pressed together, trying to look older than they feel. When the jug is filled, water sloshes against clay, and the child's steps become careful and slow. The lane is full of little hazards for small feet. A stone, a rut, a place where the ground dips. The child navigates them like a tiny pilgrim carrying something sacred, though nobody calls it that. A hand reaches out from a doorway as the child passes. A finger taps the jug lightly, not to stop the child, just to steady it for a moment. The child keeps going. The gesture is small enough to miss. Still, it carries warmth. Meanwhile, the animals sense the shift in the day sooner than people admit they do. A cow lowing once, not loudly, just as if reminding everyone it is still here. A goat pushing at a gate. Chickens wandering toward the safety of their roost, clucking softly, arguments small and familiar. The dog that slept in a patch of sun all afternoon rises and stretches, shaking dust from its coat with a dry rustle, then pads after a person as if the evening requires companionship. You hear doors opening and closing more frequently now. Not slammed, just used. The sound of a wooden latch lifting, the soft thump as a door meets its frame, the slight rattle when a bar is set in place. Each house begins to pull itself inward, gathering its people and its heat. Inside one home, the air is thicker than outside, heavy with smoke and cooking. The day's fire has been kept alive, fed in small pieces, coaxed through hours when nobody had the attention to rebuild it from scratch. Now it is asked to do more. A pot is set closer. A kettle is lifted. A small pile of kindling waits like a promise. Someone moves a pot with a cloth wrapped around their hand. The cloth is thin. The heat is real. The person's grip is firm anyway. The pot settles with a dull sound, and you hear the gentle bubbling begin, steady and quiet. The smell grows greens, onions if there are any. Maybe a bit of meat fat if the household has been lucky. More often it is broth and whatever the garden gave, made richer by time and smoke. There's a moment in the evening when the body wants to stop moving, when the mind tries to lean into stillness too soon. Still, the village doesn't let itself. The evening has chores with sharp edges. Animals must be secured. Water must be hauled. Food must be made. Tomorrow's small preparations begin even before today fully ends. For a while, the village holds this tension gently, like a hand on the shoulder. Keep going a little longer. Then rest. A man sits on a low stool near a doorway and pulls off his boots. They come away with reluctance, as if they've been glued on by mud. He shakes one boot and a clump of dried earth falls out, breaking into crumbs. The sound is dry and satisfying. He rubs his heel with his thumb and winces silently, not theatrically, just with a brief tightening around the eyes. Then his face settles again. The pain is noted and placed aside, the way many things are. Someone pours a small amount of water into a basin. You hear it splash and spread. Hands are dipped in. Fingers rub palms. Dirt lifts away in grey streams. The water quickly turns cloudy. Still, the washing matters. The touch of water on skin, after a long day, feels like a small return to being human, not just a working body. A cloth is used to wipe a face. Cheeks are rubbed until they warm slightly. A child's hands are cleaned more thoroughly than the adult's hands, because children are less careful about what goes into their mouths. The child grumbles quietly and then gives in. The cloth smells of damp linen and old smoke. In the lane outside, the church bell rings again, faint and thin. Not celebratory, not alarming, just another marker. Some people pause for the length of a breath. A head dips slightly, a hand stills on a latch. Then life continues. The village has learned to weave ritual into labor without making a show of it. The manor's presence is still there, but in the evening it changes shape. It becomes accounting, not written in books in most homes, but held in memory. Days owed, grain measured. A piece of cloth promised. A chicken to be delivered at a certain time. These obligations hover at the edge of the mind, and the mind is tired of them. Still, they remain. A dry remark slips from someone's mouth as they pass a neighbor. Not cruel, just edged with that gentle cynicism that comes from living under rules made elsewhere. The neighbor gives a short sound of agreement, half laugh, half sigh. Then both continue on. There's no rallying cry. There's just the shared understanding that tomorrow will ask again. Over time, this became normal too. Complaints kept small. Humor kept close. Survival handled without speeches. In one yard, a woman kneels and scatters scraps for chickens. The chickens rush in with quick, eager steps, pecking and clucking. The sound is busy but not loud. The woman watches for a moment, not sentimental, just making sure the strongest doesn't bully the weakest too much. Then she stands slowly, joints stiff, and rubs her knees with her palms. A boy carries a bundle of straw toward a stall. The straw scratches his arms. He holds it tight and moves carefully, because the stall floor is slick in places. He spreads the straw with a rough sweeping motion. The straw makes a soft whispering sound as it falls and settles. The stall immediately feels warmer, less hard. The animal inside shifts and breathes out, a long warm breath that smells of hay and life. In another yard, a man checks the latch on a gate twice. He lifts it, lets it fall, lifts it again. He does this not because he doubts himself, but because a goat has escaped before, and the memory of that chase still lives in his muscles. The latch holds. He nods once and moves on. Evening work has this quality. It is practical, and it is shaped by old mistakes. Inside, the evening meal begins to organize the household. It doesn't bring silence like a formal ceremony. It brings a different kind of quiet, one that settles over the room as people focus on food and warmth. A loaf of bread is brought out, wrapped in cloth. It is unwrapped with care, like something that must be protected from waste. The crust is dark. The bread is heavy. It smells faintly sour and deeply comforting. Someone tears off pieces rather than cutting slices. The tearing makes a soft crackle, and steam rises if the bread is still warm. Each piece is passed hand to hand. Fingers brush. Nobody calls attention to it. The passing is as natural as breathing. A bowl is set in the center. The bowl is plain wood or clay, scarred from use. A ladle dips into the pot and pours stew or broth into the bowl. The sound is thick and gentle. A spoon clinks against the rim. The first taste is taken without a big reaction. If it's good, it is quietly accepted. If it's thin, it is quietly accepted. Hunger doesn't leave room for performance. For a while, this is the village's deepest calm. People eating. People warming their hands around a bowl. The hearths crackle low and steady. The outside world held at the door by wood and latch. You might notice how different the air feels now. Morning air is sharp and clean. Evening air is softer, mixed with the day's smells, warmed by 100 small fires, thickened by cooking. Smoke sits low and then finds its way out through roof openings. It carries the scent of char and damp wood, and it lingers in hair and cloth. A baby is fed. Not with ceremony, just with attention. A small mouth opens and closes, and the baby's noise is the only sound that rises above the murmurs. Someone hushes the baby with a low hum. The hum isn't a song for an audience. It's a tool. It smooths the air in the room. An older child sits near the door with a crust of bread, chewing slowly, gaze unfocused. The child's eyelids droop and lift. The day has made the child heavy with sleep, but the child stays awake a little longer, holding on to the warmth of the room. A hand reaches out and smooths the child's hair once, a quick, absent gesture that says, "You're safe here." Then the hand returns to its bowl. Over time, this became normal too. Touch given without fuss. Care offered without naming it. After eating, the evening doesn't immediately turn into rest. It turns into maintenance. Bowls must be cleaned before food hardens. Ash must be managed. Water must be saved. A small portion of stew might be set aside for tomorrow's early meal, covered with a lid, pushed to a cooler part of the room. The next day already has its hooks in the household. A woman scrapes a bowl with a wooden spoon, gathering every last bit. The spoon makes a dry, scraping sound. The bowl is rinsed with a small amount of water, not much, just enough. The water is poured out into the yard where it darkens the ground. Nothing here feels endless, not even water, so nothing is used without thought. A man sharpens a tool by the firelight. The rasp of metal on stone is softer now, muffled by the room's warmth. The tool's edge catches light briefly, then disappears again. He does not stare at it like it's precious. He works on it like it's necessary, because it is. A woman sits with a basket of mending. The evening light is dim, so she works closer to the hearth. Thread is drawn through cloth with small, precise movements. The needle pricks once, a tiny wince, then she continues. Her fingers are steady. She knows this work as well as she knows her own hands. Meanwhile, outside the lane quiets again. Not empty, but hushed. People no longer drift from yard to yard as often. Doors close and stay closed. Animals settle. The well becomes silent, the bucket resting, the rope still. A faint sound of singing might rise from one house, not loud, not polished. More like someone speaking in tune because it helps them work. The sound carries for a moment and then fades. Another house answers with nothing. The village doesn't coordinate its comforts. Each household finds its own. The church remains a dark shape against the evening sky. Its stones hold cold even as fires warm the homes. The churchyard is still, the ground uneven and quiet. No one lingers there now. Evening belongs to the living. The sky shifts through its colors slowly. Not in a dramatic display, just in the steady dimming that tells every animal and every person the same truth. Night is coming. If something must be done outside, it should be done soon. A woman steps out with a pail and walks toward a trough. The pail sloshes with each step. Water spills a little, darkening the path. She tips the pail and fills the trough for animals. The water hits with a clear splash, and the sound feels louder now because the village is quieter. A cow drinks. The cow's tongue makes a soft lapping sound. The woman watches until the animal settles, then turns back toward the house. A man checks the roof thatch near his door. He presses a palm against it, testing the dampness. He tucks a loose straw back into place. It's a small action, almost meaningless. Still, it keeps the roof from loosening further. Small actions matter here. They are the difference between a minor inconvenience and a winter disaster. For a while, this is the evening's second calm. The village held together by tiny repairs and repeated checks. Inside, a child is finally guided towards sleep. Not ordered, guided. A blanket is pulled over shoulders. Straw rustles as the child settles. The child sighs, and the sigh carries a whole day in it. The room's warmth wraps around them. The hearth's light flickers across the ceiling and walls, making the shadows sway gently. The shadows are familiar. They are not frightening. They are simply the room breathing. Someone sits a moment longer by the fire, letting heat soak into their hands. They stare into the embers without thinking in big thoughts. The mind is too tired for that. It is enough to watch the small red glow, the tiny shifts, the way ash collapses and reveals a brighter coal beneath. What people rarely noticed was how often the deepest piece of village life arrived right here, after the work, after the meal, in the simple act of sitting near heat, and letting the body remember it is allowed to be still. A quiet conversation unfolds between two adults, low and slow. It isn't dramatic. It's about tomorrow's tasks, about whether the beans are ready to pick, about who will go to the market when the day comes, about whether the neighbor's fence needs help. The words drift through the room like smoke, then settle. There is no argument. There is just planning, because planning is how you make the next day less sharp. A small piece of candle wax might be lit if the household has it. The flame is tiny and precious. It smells faintly sweet compared to smoky fire. The candle's light is gentler than the hearth's, and it makes the room feel more contained. Still, candles are not wasted. The flame might be used for a few minutes, then pinched out to save what remains. Ash is gathered. A hearth is banked for the night. A small barrier of ash and coals is arranged so the fire can be revived in the morning, without starting from nothing. This is a quiet skill, learned over years. Too much air and the fire eats itself. Too little and it dies. Someone adjusts it with a stick, then sits back satisfied. Outside, the last sounds of the village thin out. A gate creaks once, then falls quiet. A dog barks once, then settles. An owl calls from the trees beyond the fields, the sound distant and steady, like a note held in the dark. The wind moves through the thatch and along the hedges. You hear it as a soft rush, then a pause, then another soft rush. Meanwhile, the village holds itself close. The manor is still out there, the church still stands, the fields still wait, but the homes have claimed their small circles of warmth. People lie down, straw rustles. Wool blankets shift. Breathing becomes slower. The day's grime sits on skin and hair, but the body doesn't care as much now. Cleanliness is a luxury measured against sleep, and sleep wins. For a while you can imagine the village as a handful of quiet fires scattered in the dark. Each one held by hands that know how to keep it alive. Each one surrounded by walls that have seen countless evenings. Each one guarding a small human life that will wake and begin again. And as the last light fades fully, the well rests, the lane rests, the tools rest, and the village slides into night with the same calm stubbornness it uses for everything else, not announcing itself, simply continuing. Night settles over the village in a way that feels familiar to the bones. Not sudden, not dramatic. Just a slow darkening that makes the edges of things softer. The lane becomes less a place you walk through and more a place you listen across. Sounds carry differently now. A latch clicks and it seems louder. A footstep on packed earth lands with a heavier meaning. Even a small cough from inside a house feels like it travels. Most doors are shut. Bars are set. Not in fear, not as a performance, but as routine. Wood against wood. A small thump. A final check. Then the house becomes its own world again. Inside, the hearth is lower than it was during the meal, but it still breathes. Coals glow under a skin of ash, and every so often a quiet crackle happens as something shifts and settles. The air is warmer near the fire and cooler at the edges of the room. You can feel the change on your cheeks if you turn your head. Warm then cool. Warm then cool. The room has its own tide. Someone sits close enough to the fire that their hands have turned pink again. They hold them out, palms down, letting heat sink into knuckles that worked all day. Their shoulders drop in small degrees, the way they do when the body finally believes it can stop. A child is already half asleep nearby. Straw rustles softly as the child turns. A blanket is tugged up, not neatly, just enough. The child's breathing evens out. then catches once, then evens out again. The sound is small, steady, and it changes the feel of the room. It reminds everyone that the day's work wasn't only for today. It was for the quiet continuation of life, one sleeping child at a time. For a while, this is what the village becomes. A set of rooms with low fires and slow breathing. The outside world doesn't vanish, but it recedes. The manor is still there, the church still stands, the fields still wait, yet the night pulls attention inward, toward warmth and bodies and the small tasks that can be done by firelight. And there are always tasks. A man sits with a tool across his knees. Not working quickly. Just checking. He runs a thumb along the edge, careful not to cut himself, feeling where the blade has dulled. The stone lies beside him, and he draws the metal across it with a gentle rasp. The sound is soft and dry, like a whisper of grit. He pauses, checks again, then repeats. Slow attention, not ambition. On the other side of the room, a woman mends a tear in cloth. The tear is small, but it would grow if ignored. She threads a needle with a practiced motion that doesn't require much light. The thread catches and pulls through fabric with a faint tugging sound. Her hands look tired but steady, fingers stained from the day's work. She doesn't sigh or dramatize it. She just makes the cloth whole enough to last. The truth is, night work is not a second job. It is the part of the day that keeps tomorrow from being worse. A small pot sits near the edge of the hearth, not boiling now, just kept warm. The smell is faint and comforting, like the room remembers the meal even after it's gone. Someone lifts the lid once, not to eat, just to check. Steam rises briefly, then disappears into the air. The lid goes back on with a quiet clink. The pot is nudged a finger's width farther from the heat. The person knows how easily food can burn if left too close. In a corner, a pair of shoes rests upside down near the fire, not touching it, just close enough to dry. They're worn, misshapen to the foot that uses them. Mud flakes off as the leather dries, leaving small crumbs on the floor. A dog noses the crumbs once, decides they're not worth it, and curls back into its spot. The dog's fur carries the day's smell of dust and animal warmth, and now it carries fire smoke too, as if the whole household shares one scent. A soft orientation comes naturally at this hour. The day has shifted from doing to tending. Not tending the fields, not tending the animals, but tending the edges of life. The loose thread, the dull blade, the damp shoe, the ember that must be kept alive. In another house not far away, a different set of sounds unfolds through the walls. You don't hear words clearly, you hear tone. Low voices. A brief laugh. The scrape of a stool as someone shifts their weight, then quiet again. The village has many small conversations like this at night. Not lively gatherings, not loud storytelling. Just the kind of talk that fits between fatigue and sleep. Sometimes the talk is practical. Tomorrow's tasks. Who will take the beans to the market when the day comes? Whether the fence by the ditch needs fixing before an animal tests it again. Whether the bread will last if the household eats it slowly. Sometimes the talk is personal in quiet ways. A worry about an older parent's cough. A remark about a child growing too fast for last year's tunic. A memory of a neighbor who died last winter and left an empty place that still feels present. Nothing is said like a confession. It's just the way people speak when the fire is low and the room is warm, and the body has stopped pretending it can carry everything alone. Now and then, gentle cynicism slips in, because it has to. Someone mutters that the manor will ask for more no matter what. Someone answers that the manor always does. The remark isn't shouted. It isn't even angry. It's the tired clarity of people who know how power works and have no energy to be surprised by it. And yet, even that cynicism is softened by the room. It doesn't turn into bitterness. It stays as a small shared truth, then fades back into the crackle of coals. A child wakes briefly, makes a small noise, then settles again. Someone reaches out without opening their eyes and rests a hand on the child's shoulder. The hand stays there until the child's breathing smooths. Then it withdraws. No words. No ceremony. Just touch. Used like a tool. Outside the lane is mostly quiet, but it's not silent. Wind moves through thatch, a soft rush that comes and goes. A board creaks as the temperature shifts and the wood contracts. Somewhere an owl calls again from the trees beyond the fields. The sound is steady and matter of fact, like the owl is simply stating that night exists from farther off. There is sometimes the faintest hint of distant travel. A cartwheel on the road. Hooves. A voice. It doesn't come close. It doesn't enter the village. Still, it reminds you that the world keeps moving even while the village rests. Over time, this became normal. Night as a pause, not an ending. A place where you do less, but not nothing. In one household, someone tends to the fire with particular care. They lift ash gently with a flat piece of wood and spread it over coals, controlling the air. The coals dim, then glow again in small points. The person leans in and listens, not to voices, to the fire itself. The faint crackle. The tiny shift when a coal collapses. They adjust again, satisfied. This is an old skill. A fire that lasts through the night means less struggle at dawn. It means heat quicker. Food sooner. A small reduction in hardship. A woven basket sits near the door, half full of beans or peas shelled earlier. The basket smells faintly of dried plant and dust. Someone takes a handful and sorts them quickly, picking out the broken ones. The motion is simple and quiet, the sort of work that occupies fingers while the mind unwinds. The broken beans will still be eaten, but maybe not saved for later. The intact ones will be stored more carefully. The household is always making tiny decisions like this even at night, even when tired. In another corner, a small wooden chest is opened. Not to admire its contents, just to check. A bit of thread, a scrap of wax, a pinch of salt, a small coin wrapped in cloth. The chest is closed again. The person doesn't smile. They don't frown. They simply confirm that the household's small reserves still exist. For a while, the room feels like a ship at anchor. The walls hold warmth. The fire holds light. The people inside hold their breath a little less tightly. Meanwhile, in a home closer to the center of the village, a spinning wheel turns slowly. The sound is gentle, a soft whir with little pauses. The spinner doesn't work fast. There's no need. The wheel is not chasing a deadline. It is simply using the last usable light before sleep. Wool slips through fingers, twist, gather wind. The thread builds itself into a small coil, thin but steady. Each bit of thread is a small victory over cold. A woman's foot presses the treadle lightly. The wheel turns. The room's shadows shift as the flame flickers. The spinner's face is calm, eyes half-lidded, not sleepy exactly, just settled. The rhythm is soothing enough that it could lull the whole house if it were louder. But it stays soft, respectful of sleep. A soft orientation line lands again without effort. This is the hour for work that doesn't require the whole body. Work that can be done while sitting. Work that keeps hands useful and thoughts quiet. A man by the door checks a strap of leather. He bends it, listens for a crack that would warn him of weakness. He rubs it with a bit of fat or oil, working it in with his thumbs until the leather looks darker. The smell is rich and earthy. The strap will hold longer now. It might keep a harness from failing. It might keep a shoe from splitting. This is how people steal time from decay, one rubbed strap at a time. The church sits outside all of this, silent and dark, but still present. Even if nobody goes there tonight, the building's existence shapes the village's sense of itself. The bell's last ring earlier has settled into memory. The stones keep their cold. The graves keep their quiet. The church is part of the village the way a shadow is part of a body. Sometimes, on nights like this, someone remembers a feast day coming, or a saint's day, or a time when work will shift, because the church demands it. The thought doesn't spark excitement. It sparks planning. How much can be done before then? What needs saving? What can be postponed? Even rest days have consequences when food depends on daylight. Still, tonight is an ordinary night. The village does not feel like it is approaching something special. It feels like it is simply moving through time, one evening at a time. What people rarely noticed was how much the night changes the way a person sees their own life. In daylight, the mind is crowded by tasks. At night, the tasks still exist, but they fall back a little, and the mind has room to notice things it ignored. A sore shoulder. A feeling of pride that the beans came up well this year. A small grief that an old friend doesn't sit by the fire anymore. A quiet gratitude that the roof held through the last storm. These thoughts are not treated like deep philosophy. They are treated like weather in the mind. They pass through. They are noted. They fade. A man turns a wooden cup in his hands, Not drinking much, just holding it. The cup is smooth where fingers have touched it for years. The rim is slightly chipped. He runs a thumb over the chip once, then stops. The cup still works. The chip is a reminder that nothing lasts untouched. The woman mending cloth ties a knot in her thread and bites the end off with her teeth. The thread tastes faintly of smoke. She spits the tiny bit of fiber out and rubs her fingertips together, smoothing a rough spot. The tear is closed. Not invisible, not pretty. Closed. She folds the cloth and sets it aside. Her hands rest on her lap for a moment. You can see the pause. Not a dramatic rest, just a brief stillness, like a bird settling on a branch. Over time, this became normal too. The day's end not marked by celebration, but by a gradual slowing of movement until movement becomes sleep. Outside, a late traveler passes the village road without entering. The sound is faint, hooves on firmer ground. A wheel turning. A voice perhaps, low and indistinct. The village does not react. Doors stay shut. Fires stay low. The traveler is part of the outside world's flow, and the village lets that flow pass by. Inside, someone adds one small stick to the fire, not enough to wake the room with bright flame, just enough to keep coals alive. The stick catches and makes a soft pop. A tiny shower of sparks rises and disappears. The room's light brightens for a moment, then settles. A child murmurs in sleep. The sound is unclear, more breath than word. An adult smiles without thinking, a small private expression that doesn't demand attention. Then the face relaxes again. Meanwhile, in another household, an older woman sits near the hearth and rubs her hands together. Her knuckles are swollen from years of cold and work. She holds them near the coals, then pulls them back, then holds them near again, as if learning the best distance. Her eyes close briefly. She breathes out slowly. The room around her continues. Someone shifts on straw. Someone clears their throat. The fire whispers. There's a point in the night when the village becomes less like a collection of tasks and more like a collection of breaths. You feel it when conversation stops, not because someone ordered it to stop, but because it ran out naturally. You feel it when a tool is set down and not picked up again. You feel it when the last bowl is rinsed and placed upside down to dry. For a while, the village holds this quiet like a blanket. A final soft orientation arrives as the night deepens. The work of the day has narrowed into a few last motions. A blanket pulled up, a door checked, a child's hair smoothed once more. The people settle on straw beds or rough pallets. Wool blankets scratch lightly against skin. A hand finds a familiar place on a spouse's arm or shoulder. Not romantic, familiar. A reassurance built from years of sharing a small space. Breathing slows. The room's sounds become the small ones that don't require waking attention. The creak of a beam as the house cools. The tiny crackle of coals. The wind slipping along the thatch. And even as sleep arrives in pieces, the village does not feel like it is shutting down. It feels like it is continuing in a quieter mode, like the fire itself. Lower, steadier, still alive. Outside, the church remains in darkness. The manor remains beyond. The fields remain waiting. The road remains open. None of these things disappear. They simply pause in importance for a few hours. Inside, the coals glow under ash, keeping their promise. The last person awake watches them for a moment longer, not thinking in big thoughts, just letting their eyes rest on the gentle red points. Then that person shifts, lies down, and the village slides further into its own slow breathing, carried by warmth, by habit, and by the ordinary mercy of a night that asks nothing more than rest. Night doesn't stay perfectly still. It softens and shifts in tiny ways, like a blanket settling after someone turns in their sleep. The village holds its quiet, but it breathes through it. A beam gives a slow creak as the wood cools. A roof thatch whispers when the wind presses against it. Somewhere, a coal collapses inward and makes a faint sound that would be nothing at all in daytime. But at night it feels like a clear little statement. Inside a house, the air is warmer near the hearth and cooler near the door. The warmth doesn't reach every corner equally, and everyone in the room knows it without discussing it. Bodies choose places the way water chooses low ground. A child is tucked closer to the heat. An older person is given the spot where the draft is weakest. The dog curls where it can feel warmth on its ribs and cool air on its nose at the same time. The village sleeps in a way that is never fully relaxed. Not because of fear, but because of habit. The night is for rest, yes, but rest is always balanced against the simple fact that things still need watching. A fire can die, a roof can leak, an animal can knock a latch loose. These aren't rare disasters. They're ordinary possibilities, like rain or wind. People don't panic over them. They just build their sleep around them. For a while, everything stays steady. Then, in one house, a person wakes without meaning to. Not fully alert, not startled. Just a small return to awareness, like a bubble rising in a pot. The body shifts. Straw rustles. A broom's sounds come back in gentle pieces. Breathing from others. The low crackle from the hearth. The outside wind, faint and patient. The person sits up slowly, not wanting to wake anyone else. Their joints feel stiff, like the day's work never fully left the body. They pause, letting the stiffness loosen in small degrees. Then they stand and move toward the hearth with careful steps, feet finding familiar places in the dark. The ash on the coals has settled like a skin. The person crouches and nudges it with a stick. A dim red point appears, then another. The coals are still alive, just hidden. The person gives a small breath toward them, not strong, not hurried. The glow strengthens. A thin stick is slid into place. It catches slowly, then with a soft crackle. The room warms by a hair's breadth, and the person's shoulders ease, as if they have corrected something that could have become trouble later. This is a kind of quiet competence that never gets admired. Still, it keeps the village moving. The person turns back toward the sleeping room. Shapes lie under blankets, bodies gathered close. A child's hand sticks out from under wool, fingers curled loosely. The person tucks the blanket around that hand without touching the child's face. The child sighs and continues sleeping. The sigh is small, but it lands like relief. Outside, the lane is dark and empty, but not dead. A cat moves along a fence line, paws silent. It pauses near a shed and listens, head tilted, hunting for the tiny sounds of mice. Somewhere beyond the houses, an owl calls again, not urgent, just part of the night's order. Farther still, across fields, a fox might pass without being seen, its movement a quiet thread through the darkness. The church stands in the same place it always stands. Its stones colder now than the air around it. In daylight, its presence can feel social, a place of gathering and obligation. At night, it feels more like a memory made solid. The churchyard is a dark patch of ground where the earth is uneven, and the air holds the damp smell of moss and soil. No one is there. No one needs to be. The village knows that place will be waiting in the morning the same as it always does. Even the manor out beyond becomes less of an immediate pressure at night. It does not disappear. It simply becomes abstract again, like a weight set down for a few hours. People will pick it up tomorrow because they have to. But at this hour the body gives itself permission to forget it briefly. In another house, a baby wakes and makes a small noise. Not a full cry, just a sound that says I exist, and I'm uncomfortable. An adult stirs, still half asleep, and reaches out. There is a soft rustle of cloth. A hand finds the baby's cheek and strokes once, slow and firm. The baby quiets slightly. The adult shifts again, pulling the baby closer, offering warmth. The baby's breathing slows. The room returns to its low hush. For a while, this is the village's true luxury. Not wealth, not leisure. Just the ability to smooth a moment and return to sleep. The night continues in these small adjustments. A roof makes a faint dripping sound in one corner, where a leak has never quite been fixed properly. The drip is slow. It hits a clay bowl set there for that purpose. Plink, pause, plink. The bowl has likely been there for weeks, moved and emptied and set back again. Nobody treats the leak like a dramatic crisis unless it becomes one. For now, it is managed. A man wakes in that house and listens to the drip for a few breaths. He thinks about the thatch. He thinks about the wood underneath. He thinks about whether the weather will turn worse. His mind tries to do a little planning, even at this hour, because the mind in a village is trained to watch for the next problem before it becomes big. Still, his tiredness wins. He rolls onto his side and lets the drip continue in its quiet rhythm. Over time, this became normal, living alongside imperfect things. The air outside cools further. A light frost might settle on the grass beyond the houses, depending on the season. It isn't heavy, just a thin edge of cold that makes each blade of grass feel sharper under the fingertips. The village doesn't wake to admire it. It wakes and responds to it. Frost means extra care with animals. Frost means the well rope might be stiff. Frost means the morning will bite a little. Before dawn, even the animals shift. A cow in a stall breathes out in a long warm stream. The stall smells of straw and animal warmth, and the smell holds the night in place like a steady presence. A horse stamps once, shifting weight, then settles again. The sound of the hoof against packed earth is dull and contained. It doesn't ring out. It stays within the wooden walls. In the yards, chickens huddle together, feathers puffed, heads tucked. They don't make their daytime complaints now. They save their energy. The dog inside the house lifts its head briefly when a distant sound passes along the lane, then lowers it again, deciding it isn't worth announcing. The dog's trust in the night is not innocence. It is experience. Meanwhile, the village's quiet has a different flavor than simple silence. It holds effort. It holds memory. It holds the faint smell of smoke that never fully leaves, even when fires are low. It holds dampness in the thatch. It holds the faint sour edge of stored grain. It holds the scent of wool blankets and bodies that have worked hard and are finally still. The truth is, this kind of night repeats so often that it becomes the background of life. People do not mark each night as special. They notice only when something changes. A storm, a sickness, a visitor, a shout. Tonight, nothing like that happens. Tonight is the kind of night that allows the village to continue being ordinary. Toward the deepest part of the night, a faint change begins at the horizon, though no one sees it yet. It is not light. It is more like the darkness thinning slightly. The way black cloth looks different when it's stretched. The world holds its breath before morning. Inside a home, someone shifts and reaches for a cup left near the hearth. The cup holds a little water. The water is not cold enough to hurt the teeth, but it is cool enough to feel clean. The person drinks a small sip and sets the cup back down. The action is so quiet it barely exists. Still, it is part of the body's negotiation with fatigue. A child rolls over and presses their face into a blanket. The blanket smells of smoke and wool and skin. It's not a pleasant smell in the way perfume is pleasant. It's the smell of belonging. The child's breathing deepens. A few strands of hair stick to the child's forehead. No one notices. No one needs to. There is a moment when the village seems to hover between night and day, and it feels almost weightless. The fires are low. The lane is empty. The tools are still. The fields are dark. Even the church bell, which has so much authority by day, is silent and powerless now. What people rarely noticed was that this hovering hour is one of the few times when the village is not actively producing anything. It is not growing grain. It is not mending cloth. It is not bargaining at market. It is simply existing. And that simple existing is what gives the next day its foundation. Then, somewhere, a rooster makes a small, uncertain sound. Not the full call. Just a throat clearing, as if testing whether it's time. The sound breaks the stillness in a gentle way. Another rooster answers faintly, then stops. The village does not leap awake. It absorbs the sound as if it has heard it forever, because it has. A little later, the rooster calls properly. The call is sharp, cutting through the dimness, and it carries across the roofs and hedges. It feels like a line drawn in the air. Morning is coming whether anyone wants it or not. In one house, the person who woke earlier to tend the fire hears the rooster and shifts again, half smiling without realizing it. Not joy, not excitement, just recognition. The day has begun its approach. The person adds one more small stick to the hearth, then sits back. The stick catches, and the fire's crackle becomes slightly more confident. The warmth begins to spread again, slow and steady. The person listens. Beyond the walls, the village is still mostly asleep. Still, there are faint signs. A door bar being lifted in a different house. A soft cough, the scrape of a stool. A pail being moved, its wooden base tapping softly against the floor. In the lane, the first door opens a crack. A cold draft slides out, and a figure steps into it. The figure moves like someone who has done this every morning and will do it again. A cloak is pulled tight. Feet meet the ground. The ground answers with dampness. You stay with the small sensory truths of that first step outside. The cold air on cheeks. The smell of wet earth. The faint scent of smoke from a neighbor's hearth. The sound of a distant animal shifting. The quiet of the village holding its last sleep. The person walks toward the well. The well stands in the same place, patient, indifferent. The rope feels rough and slightly stiff from the night's cold. The person wraps the rope around a hand once, careful not to burn skin on the friction later. The bucket goes down with a soft scrape. The rope slides, the beam creaks. When the bucket reaches the water, there is that familiar hollow gulp, as if the well is swallowing the bucket and returning it filled. The person pulls. The bucket rises, heavy and dark, water sloshing inside. The sound is deeper now, more present in the still air. The bucket knocks the stone edge lightly. The person steadies it. Water is poured into a pail, and the splash feels like the loudest thing in the world for a moment. Then it settles into normal. Another figure appears at another doorway. This one carries a bundle of sticks. The sticks knock together softly, a dry tapping that contrasts with the wet sounds of the well. The figure disappears back inside, and you can almost picture the sticks being placed near the hearth, ready to coax coals into flame. A dog steps into the lane and stretches. Its spine arches. It shakes once, sending a faint spray of dust and dry straw bits into the air. The dog's ears tilt toward the well sounds. It trots a few steps, then stops to sniff a spot on the ground that holds yesterday's scent. Dogs read villages through smell the way people read them through habit. A child's voice does not rise yet. Children wake later, usually, unless they're needed early. For now, the village belongs to the first workers and the ones who keep the household running. Their movements are quiet, practiced, and not dramatic. For a while this worked. The day begins in layers, as if the village is a fire itself, brightening slowly from embers to flame. Inside a house, someone lifts a clay pot and sets it near the coals. You hear the dull scrape of pottery against stone. The pot holds water and grain, ready to become porridge again. The spoon taps the pot's side. The sound is simple. The smell hasn't started yet. It will. A woman steps outside with a pail and moves toward a trough. The pail sloshes. Water spills in small drops, darkening the ground. She tips it into the trough. The splash is clear. A cow in the nearby stall lifts its head, ears forward, and breathes out. The woman rests her hand on the trough edge for a moment, steadying herself, then straightens slowly. You might notice that morning work has a different quality than midday work. It is not as heavy yet. It is more about preparing the body and the household for the heavier things later. Water, fire, a little food, a quick check of latches, a glance at the sky. These are the simple ingredients that allow the rest of the day to happen. The church bell does not ring immediately. It will ring when it is time, but the village begins without it. The village begins with the well, the hearth, and the first careful steps into cold air. As the light increases, you start to hear more. A second bucket at the well. A third. The rope sounds overlap, creating a gentle pattern slide, creak, splash, thud. The lane takes on the faint murmur of waking voices, low and contained. A man passes with a tool over his shoulder. The tool handle is polished where his hand grips it. He walks around the wettest patches without looking down much, because his feet already know where they are. He pauses near a fence and tests it with a push. The fence holds. He nods once, then continues. In a yard, a woman shakes out a cloth. Dust lifts and then settles again. The cloth snaps softly. She folds it and sets it aside. The act is quick and efficient, as if she's clearing space in the day for what matters more. A small pot of yesterday's stew is opened and checked. The smell that rises is faintly sour but still acceptable. The person closes the lid again. The stew will be heated later. Waste is not an option. The household makes the best of what it has, and that best is often a careful balance between caution and necessity. Over time, this became normal too, the constant judging of food, fire, and time. The lane grows a little busier. Not noisy, just occupied. A neighbor passes close enough to exchange a low word. Not a greeting like in a city, not a performance. Just recognition. A small note about the weather. A comment about the ground's dampness. A dry remark about how the roof leaked again. The remark lands, receives a quiet sound of agreement, then moves on. The village is not sentimental about its hardships. It doesn't have the energy. Still, It has room for small shared humor, and that humor is one of the things that keeps the day from feeling like a punishment. A rooster calls again, as if insisting. The call is answered by a second rooster farther off. The sound makes the village feel larger, like you can sense the boundaries of it through the birds' voices. Beyond the village, the fields begin to show their shape. Furrows appear as darker lines. The ditch glints faintly with water. The hedges become visible as rough, uneven walls of green. The path to the fields waits like it always waits. It isn't demanding yet. It's simply present, a route worn by thousands of mornings. In one house, a child wakes and sits up, eyes still heavy. The child rubs their face with both hands. Straw sticks to their hair. They look around, locating the day. An adult murmurs a few words low and calm, and the child's shoulders relax. The adult points toward a bowl. The child shuffles over and eats without complaint, spoon scraping softly against wood. The sound of eating is strangely grounding. It's proof that the day has begun in the most basic way. Warmth into the body, fuel for work. The porridge is plain, but it fills the belly. A small piece of bread might be added if there is bread. If not, the porridge still does its job. Meanwhile, outside, someone is already loading a small cart. The cart's wood creaks, the wheel complains. A harness strap is checked. The leather squeaks softly as it is tightened. The animal pulling it shifts and breathes out. The breath is warm and visible in the cold air. A man speaks to the animal in a low voice, not because the animal needs words, but because the sound seems to smooth the moment. The animal stands. The man stands. The cart is ready. The church bell finally rings, thin and distant. Not loud enough to startle anyone, just enough to mark the morning's shape. A few heads tilt slightly, acknowledging it. A breath is taken. Then work continues. The truth is, the village does not stop for any single sound. It layers sounds and keeps moving. As the morning brightens further, the smell of smoke increases. Fires are being fed. The village begins to smell like itself again. Wood smoke, damp earth, animal warmth, and the faint soreness of stored grain. These smells are not pleasant in a neat way, but they are familiar, and familiarity has a calming power. You drift with the village's awakening. The well's rhythm, the hearth's crackle, the low voices, the soft scrape of tools being lifted and set down, the gentle sighs that people make without meaning to, the sound of bodies accepting their own tiredness and moving anyway. What people rarely noticed was how much courage sits inside this ordinary return. Not courage with banners or speeches, just the courage of beginning again, the courage of stepping into cold air and lifting a pail, the courage of coaxing coals into flame, the courage of walking toward a field that will ask for hours of bending and pulling. And yet, nobody calls it courage, they call it mourning, and they get on with it. The lane is fully awake now. Not crowded but alive. Children appear more often, carrying small things, being guided with gentle hands. Adults move with purpose, their tasks sorting themselves without a written plan. A neighbor offers a tool and receives it back later. A short exchange happens at a doorway. A piece of bread is handed to a child who is too slow to eat at the table. The child bites and chews while walking, crumbs falling and being ignored. Over time, this became normal too, eating and working braided together. On the edge of the village, the field path begins to collect people again. Tools on shoulders, baskets in hands, bodies moving at a pace that can be sustained. The village's outward flow begins, the daily migration towards soil and obligation and daylight. But even as that outward flow starts, the village does not empty. Some remain behind for domestic work. Some remain because their bodies cannot handle the field. Some remain because their craft keeps them near the hearth and the bench. The village divides itself into these quiet roles without announcement, and the day builds. As the last of the early mist lifts, you catch the sound of the well one more time. Bucket knocking stone, water splashing into a pail. It's the same sound as yesterday. It will be the same sound tomorrow. It is steady enough to feel like a heartbeat. And as the first group starts down the field path again, the village holds its shape behind them, doors ajar, fires warming, animals shifting in stalls, the church silent for now, the manor waiting beyond, and the ordinary day taking hold once more, calm and persistent, asking for work without raising its voice. By mid-morning, The village is already deep into its ordinary momentum again. The lane has its familiar scuffs, its puddles disturbed and reformed, its small pieces of straw crushed underfoot. Smoke rises in thin strands from a few roofs, and the air carries that steady mix of damp earth and wood smoke that feels like a signature you stop noticing once it's yours. There are days when the market matters more than anything else. Days when the road is used on purpose, when baskets are packed with care, when people measure their goods with a different kind of attention. Those days exist. They're real. They sit on the calendar like stones. And yet, most days the market is mostly an idea. Not because nobody wants it. Because life here has a way of keeping you close. Water to draw, animals to tend, a child's sleeve to mend, a roof edge to tuck back into place, a fence post that leans just enough to promise trouble later. Even when you know the market day is coming, the ordinary day still arrives first and asks for its due. For a while, the village holds this quiet tension between the wider world and its own small needs. You can feel it in the way someone checks a basket twice, then sets it down again. The basket is woven from reeds or willow, sturdy but not beautiful. It smells faintly of dried plant and old grain. Inside, there might be eggs laid in straw, tucked so carefully you can tell the person carrying them has already imagined the disaster of a cracked shell. Or there might be a small bundle of wool, cleaned enough to trade, but still smelling faintly of the animal it came from. Or a piece of cloth, patched and repatched, yet still useful to someone who needs it more than you do. The basket waits by a doorway like a promise that may or may not be kept today. In another house, a man looks at a small leather pouch. It isn't heavy. There isn't much inside. A few coins perhaps, or just a single coin wrapped in cloth so it doesn't disappear. He runs his thumb over the knot, then sets it back down. The market is not a place you go with empty hands, and it's not a place you go lightly. Even travel of a few miles costs time and energy and risk. Not dramatic risk, just the risk of arriving and finding the price is wrong, or the road is muddy, or your goods aren't what people want today. The truth is, market day sounds simple, but the village knows better. Outside, near a fence line, a woman shakes a chicken cage once, checking it. The chicken inside complains with a short, irritated cluck. The cage is made of thin slats and rough cord, good enough to hold a bird for a journey. The woman's hands test the cord, tugging at knots. She tightens one. The cord bites her fingertips. She doesn't react. She has learned that small pain is part of keeping things together. The bird flaps once, then settles. The woman murmurs something low, not a lullaby, not affection exactly. More like a practical reassurance that the bird won't understand, but the woman seems to need anyway. Then she carries the cage a few steps and sets it down again in the shade, as if still deciding. Meanwhile, the village continues as if no market exists at all. A pail sloshes at the well. The rope slides, the bucket knocks stone. Water pours into a trough with a clean splash. A cow drinks, slow and steady, the sound of lapping oddly soothing in the brightening day. A man sharpens a blade near his doorway. The rasp is patient and even. It doesn't say, special occasion. It says, tools must work. A child runs 2 steps, then slows, remembering the small bundle being carried. The child's feet make soft taps on packed earth. A dog follows, then turns away when it loses interest. The dog's life, like everyone's, is made of little decisions. Over time, this became normal. The market sits at the edge of thought while the village keeps doing what it always does. Still, there are signs when a trip might actually happen. You see it in the way someone cleans their shoes more than usual, rubbing mud off with a stick and a cloth. Not because they want to look refined, but because dry leather lasts longer, and a road can be unforgiving. You see it in the way a cloak is checked for holes, because wind on an open path is colder than wind between houses. You see it in the way a small bundle of bread is wrapped in cloth, because a person walking to market cannot waste money on food if they can carry their own. A woman stands at the edge of her yard and looks toward the road. She doesn't shade her eyes dramatically. She simply narrows them slightly, reading the sky and the ground the way village people do. The sky is clear enough. The ground, though, tells its own story. Yesterday's dampness still sits in the low parts. The ditch by the field path still holds water. The road beyond the village is likely slick in places, and slick roads turn a simple walk into a tiring slog. She lowers her gaze and exhales quietly through her nose, the kind of exhale that carries a whole set of calculations without turning into a complaint. Nearby, someone else is making a different calculation. A pot is simmering. The smell is simple and steady, greens and broth. The household has enough to eat today, but not enough to waste a day's labor without thought. If a person goes to market, someone else must cover the tasks left behind. Who will draw the water? Who will watch the youngest? Who will mend the fence? Who will feed the animals? The village is not built for absence. It can handle it, but it notices. For a while, the idea of leaving feels heavy. What's easy to forget is how much of medieval life is about staying put. The world may be connected by roads, but most people live within a tight circle. House, lane, well, fields, church. The market is a rare widening of that circle. It brings new faces, new smells, new goods. It also brings the quiet sense that you are stepping into a space where you are not fully known, where your small village manners may not matter, where a trader might smile and still take you for more than you can spare. Not because traders are villains, because trading is its own kind of work, and it has its own rules. Still, on a day like this, one person in the village does decide to go. Not with fanfare. Just with a small tightening of straps and a steadying breath. A man appears in the lane with a donkey or a small pony, the animal's ears flicking toward every sound. The animal's hooves make a dull clop on firmer ground, and a soft squelch in the dampest parts. A simple pack saddle sits on its back, and the man checks the straps with practiced hands, tugging here, loosening there. Leather squeaks. The animal shifts its weight and breathes out, warm and visible for a moment in the cooler air. The man's basket is tied down carefully. Inside, maybe there are eggs. Maybe there is wool. Maybe there is a small crock of butter sealed with a cloth and string. Whatever it is precious enough to justify the trip and modest enough to be carried. A neighbor watches from a doorway. The neighbor does not clap or cheer. The neighbor simply calls a low warning about the ditch near the bend, or mentions that the road was soft yesterday. The man nods. The warning is accepted like a tool handed over. The donkey flicks its tail, as if it has its own opinions about the trip. The man makes a short sound, not harsh, and the animal steps forward. And then, without any big moment, the man leaves. The lane returns to itself almost immediately. The village has learned not to dramatize departures. People come and go. Sometimes they return with salt or iron nails, or a strip of cloth dyed a color that feels almost too bright for this place. Sometimes they return with nothing, because the market didn't favor them today, or because they chose to keep their coins for a worse day. The village doesn't demand success. It demands trying when it's needed. Meanwhile, life carries on quietly. A woman kneads dough on a table that has seen 1,000 meals. The dough sticks slightly. Her hands dust flour. Press, fold, turn. The table creaks faintly. A child watches for a moment, then loses interest and wanders off to poke at straw with a stick. The hearth crackles softly, and the smell of smoke sits in the beams above like an old resident. In a yard, a man repairs a fence. He takes a stake, points the end with a knife, then drives it into the ground with a wooden mallet. Thud, thud. The sound is deep and steady. Each strike lands like a heartbeat. He pauses, checks the line, then ties a rope around the new stake with a quick knot that his fingers know without teaching. Over time, this became normal. A world kept in place by small repairs done before they become disasters. Closer to the center of the village, near the churchyard, a few people cross paths. An older woman carries a small bundle wrapped in cloth, walking carefully. The bundle might be herbs, or a bit of candle wax, or something intended as an offering, or simply something carried, because the hands like to hold a purpose. She walks past the church stones without looking up much. The church is there, and it will be there later. Her attention is on her feet and the ground. You can hear the church bell at a distance sometimes, not ringing in full voice. More like a reminder that time is moving. The bell's sound is thinner than a city bell. It doesn't fill the whole world. It just marks the village's small circle. And still, even with the bell, the day's true clock is labor. A small group of children gathers near a hedge. They are not being supervised with constant eyes. Village children are supervised by the fact that there is always someone nearby, and always something that needs doing. The children find a stick, find a stone, find a piece of twine. They make a game out of what the village offers. Their laughter rises briefly, then falls, as if even laughter knows it should not stay too loud for too long. An adult calls one child's name, low and firm. The child hesitates, then comes. The adult points toward a task. Carry this, fetch that. The child's shoulders slump slightly, then the child moves. It isn't cruelty. It's the simple fact that small hands can help, and in a village, help is part of belonging. You might notice how the village uses children as part of its economy without making it sound harsh. A child carries water. A child gathers kindling. A child watches a younger sibling. A child learns how to tie a knot by watching a knot tied 1,000 times. It is not romantic. It is not monstrous. It is simply the shape of life here. Meanwhile, the market-bound man is now on the road. You can feel the road even without seeing it. It's not a smooth ribbon. It's rutted, soft in places, hard in others. It passes hedges, small stands of trees, patches of field. It carries smells that change as you move, damp leaves in shaded spots, sun, warm dust on higher ground, manure near pastures, the faint tang of water near a stream crossing. The man's steps are steady. The donkey's pace is patient. The rope in the man's hand feels rough and familiar. The basket sways slightly. The man keeps it from swinging too much. Eggs don't tolerate bouncing. On the road, the man might pass another traveler. A woman with a bundle on her back. A boy driving a small herd of pigs along the verge. A priest on foot, traveling with a quiet purpose. These meetings are brief, a nod, a low word. Then each continues. Travelers don't pour themselves out into conversation. They conserve breath and time. At the market town, the air would be different. More voices, more smells layered together. The sharp scent of tanning, the sweet scent of baking, the smell of fish if the town is near water, the smell of animals penned for sale, the smell of strangers, which is simply the smell of bodies not mixed into your own household smoke. But that is later, and it might not even happen today if the road proves too slow. Back in the village, the day is turning toward midday again. The sun climbs, shadows shorten, the damp patches in the lane dry. Dust rises in faint puffs under steps, especially where the ground has been packed hard by many feet. A woman steps out with a cloth and shakes it. Dust floats in the sunbeam and then settles. She looks at the cloth as if it's a problem she can solve, then folds it and goes back inside. In another doorway, an older man sits and repairs a net or rope, his fingers moving slowly but surely. The rope bites his skin a little. He ignores it. He has been bitten by rope for years. For a while, the village holds a calm hum, the kind that can carry you without asking you to pay attention to every detail. Then you notice the quieter pressures again. A household that sent someone to market has one less set of hands today. That changes everything by small degrees. Someone else draws the water. Someone else checks the animals. Someone else walks the edge of the garden plot and pinches off pests or pulls weeds. The work doesn't disappear. It simply shifts onto different shoulders. If the market trip is successful, it can feel worth it. A bit of salt to keep food from spoiling. A small iron nail that makes a repair easier. A strip of cloth that can be cut into patches. A new blade, expensive but sharp, that saves hours of frustration. If it isn't successful, the village shrugs in the only way it can. The household still has to eat. The field still has to be worked. The manor still expects its due. The truth is, the market does not rescue anyone. It only rearranges their options. Around midday, a smell of cooking builds again. It is not fancy. It is the smell of heat and water and whatever the household can spare. The pot bubbles. The spoon scrapes. The bowl is set down. Bread is torn. Pieces are passed. The room's warmth gathers around bodies that have already spent hours in motion. In one house, someone eats standing. Not because they are too busy to sit, but because sitting feels like a trap. If they sit, they might not stand again easily. The body knows that feeling. So they keep moving, slowly, chewing while they do. Outside, the well is used again. The rope slides. The bucket rises. Water splashes. The sound repeats, and each repetition makes the village feel steady. Over time, this became normal. A life measured in loops. By early afternoon, you can hear the craft work more clearly. A soft tapping from a yard where someone shapes wood. The dull ring of a hammer against iron from a small forge shelter. Not the roaring industry of a town, just a village forge. A stubborn fire and a few careful strikes. The smell of hot metal is sharp and clean compared to smoke, and it floats for a moment before the wind carries it away. A man at the forge wipes sweat from his brow with the back of his wrist. His hands are dark, stained by soot. He grips tongs and turns a piece of iron over the coals. The iron glows faintly. He lifts it and strikes it on an anvil. The sound is crisp, then quickly softened by distance and walls. He strikes again. Then he pauses, listening to the metal in the way people listen to things that can fail. He cools it in water. The hiss is brief and clear. Steam rises. The smell shifts again, iron and water meeting. The tool he's making or repairing is not a masterpiece. It is a small thing that will let someone work tomorrow. What people rarely noticed was how much a village depends on these small moments of craft. The forge, the cobbler's bench, the spinner's wheel. Without them, the village would wear out faster than it could replace itself. In another home, a woman checks a small store of salt. She pinches a tiny amount between finger and thumb, then closes the pouch again carefully. Salt is not used casually. It's used like medicine, measured and guarded. The woman's face does not look greedy or frightened. It looks practical. She is thinking about tomorrow, and the next day and the next season. As the afternoon stretches on, the village feels both busy and still. Busy with motion, still with repetition. The field workers are out again, bending and pulling. The domestic workers are in yards and homes, washing, mending, cooking, feeding animals. The children move between tasks and play, never fully free of either. And somewhere on the road, the market traveler is still walking. If the man reaches the market town, he will step into a different sound world. Voices layered together, not low and contained like village voices, but mixed and overlapping. Traders calling out their goods. Animals complaining. Wheels creaking. A hammer striking somewhere. The town's noise has edges. The man might find a familiar face there, another villager from a nearby place. They might exchange a few words, low out of habit, then realize they need to speak a little louder to be heard. That slight lifting of voice can feel strange, like trying on a different coat. He might set his basket down near other baskets. He might watch a woman's hands as she weighs eggs, deciding whether to trade. He might negotiate for salt, for iron, for a small piece of cloth. Negotiation isn't a dramatic battle. It's a slow push and pull, a calm insistence on not being cheated and not cheating too much. He might count coins and feel the weight of them, not physically heavy, but heavy in meaning. Each coin spent is a choice that closes other choices. He might decide to keep one coin back for a worse day. He might decide to spend it now because salt matters more than worry. If he returns with goods, the village will receive them quietly. A neighbor will glance and notice the small pouch of salt, the new blade, the strip of cloth. There will be no cheering. There will be a nod, a low remark, a sense of relief that doesn't need to be declared. If he returns with nothing, the village will receive him quietly too. The donkey will be unstrapped. The empty basket will be carried inside. Someone will say a dry line about the market being stingy today. Someone will answer with a short laugh that fades. Then the household will eat what it has and go to bed as usual, because that is what the village does. Back in the village, the afternoon begins to tilt toward evening. Shadows lengthen. The air cools slightly. The lane becomes a little softer in sound. You hear more gates, more doors, more water being carried. The well's rope slides again, and the bucket knocks stone with that familiar gentle thud. A woman fills a pail and carries it toward a trough. The pail sloshes, spilling small drops that darken the path. She tips it and fills the trough. The splash is clear and bright. A cow drinks. The cow's breath is warm. The woman watches for a moment, then turns back toward the house. The village's evening chores begin gathering themselves. A man checks a latch twice. A child gathers kindling. A woman stirs a pot. The smell of cooking builds again, this time thicker, more present. Smoke rises. The air becomes the village's evening air, softer and heavier. For a while, everything feels like it is moving toward the same place, toward hearths, toward bowls, toward rest. Then, near the edge of the lane, you see a figure returning on the road. It might be the market traveler. It might be someone else. The distance makes it hard to tell at first. The figure moves slowly, the pace of someone who has been walking for hours. A donkey's shape is visible, ears upright, head bobbing slightly with each step. As the figure comes closer, you can hear the soft clop of hooves, the creak of leather, the faint rattle of a basket strap. The lane sounds shift to accommodate this arrival. A dog barks once, then stops. A child pauses mid-step and watches, eyes wide with the simple curiosity of someone who wants to see what the road brought. The traveler enters the village without fanfare. The donkey is led toward a yard. A strap is loosened. The basket is lifted. If there are goods, they are carried inside quickly, not hidden, just protected from unnecessary handling. If there are no goods, the empty basket is carried inside with the same care, because the basket still matters. A neighbor calls a low word. The traveler answers. A short exchange happens, practical and calm. The traveler's shoulders drop slightly. The day's long road has been completed. Over time, this became normal too. A village that touches the wider world occasionally, and then returns to itself. What people rarely noticed was how little the wider world changes the village on most days. The market may bring salt, but it doesn't change the way water is drawn. It may bring iron nails, but it doesn't change the way fire is coaxed. It may bring a strip of cloth dyed a shade you don't usually see, but it doesn't change the way the roof must be checked before rain. The village takes what it can and continues. As evening deepens, the lane quiets again, doors close. Fires glow. The smell of stew and smoke settles into the air, voices soften. Children's energy drains. The dog circles and lies down where the warmth will reach it. In one house, the market goods are unwrapped by firelight if there are goods. A pouch is opened. Salt is pinched between fingers and admired in the smallest possible way, not like treasure, but like relief. A small iron item is turned in a hand, feeling its weight. A strip of cloth is unfolded and refolded, the fingers already imagining where it will patch a tear. If there are no goods, then the household still unwraps something else. Bread, a bowl, a blanket. The same motions of making do. A quiet cynicism might slip through a doorway. A remark about prices. A remark about traders. A remark about how the road always takes more from you than you think. The remark is met with a low sound of agreement, then disappears into the room's warmth, and the day settles. The market, in the end, is not the center of this story. It is a distant edge, a widening of the circle that happens now and then tightens again. The village's real center remains where it always was, at the well, at the hearth, at the table, in the hands that repair, and the bodies that work. And the quiet way evening arrives and asks the village to gather itself back into warmth. Evening settles into the village with a familiar weight. And then it keeps going, slowly turning into night. The sky darkens, the lane quiets, and the work that was spread across fields and yards gathers itself back into the smaller rooms. The village becomes a collection of warm pockets, each one held together by low firelight and the closeness of bodies. And still, there's always one thing that doesn't belong to any single household. The church, during the day. The church can feel like a presence you brush past. A building you pass on the way to water, on the way to the fields, on the way to wherever the day pulls you. Its stones are there whether you look at them or not. Its shadow falls in the same place. Its smell of cold stone and moss is steady. Even if you never step inside, the church keeps time around you, quietly claiming a corner of the village's attention. At night, the church does something different. It becomes more distant and more solid at once. A dark shape, heavier than the houses, more still than the trees. The houses change with light and smoke. The church stays itself. Inside one home, someone leans close to the embers and turns a bowl in their hands, not eating now, just holding it. The bowl is warm. The person's fingers rest on it as if warmth can move from clay to bone. Across the room, a woman ties off a thread and smooths a patched sleeve. A child shifts in straw and makes a small sound, then settles again. The dog's breathing is slow and steady, a quiet animal rhythm that makes the room feel safer without anyone naming it. For a while, the village seems like it's ready to let the church be only a shadow outside. Then a sound arrives that changes that feeling. It's not loud. It doesn't need to be. A thin bell note drifting across the lane. Not sharp like morning, not busy like noon. This bell feels like an evening marker, the kind that doesn't demand a gathering, but reminds you that the day has edges. The sound slides into the village like smoke, and it finds people even through walls. A head turns. A hand pauses mid-motion. Someone exhales slowly through the nose, as if acknowledging a truth they already knew. The bell stops, and the room returns to its hush, but the village has been nudged into a shared awareness. Not excitement. Not fear. Just orientation. For a while this worked. The village could hold 100 private lives and still feel like one place, simply by listening to the same sound at the same time. On some evenings, the church is only that. A bell that marks time. A building that stands. A presence that makes people remember there is something larger than the immediate hunger and the immediate work. On other evenings, the church door matters. A man steps out into the lane, cloak pulled close. The air is cooler now, and it bites gently at his ears. He doesn't stride like someone on a mission. He walks the way tired people walk when they still have one more obligation to meet. His boots make soft sounds on packed earth. A puddle reflects a thin slice of sky. He steps around it without thinking. Behind him, another figure slips out of a doorway. This one is older, moving carefully, joints stiff. The older figure keeps to the edge of the lane where the ground is firmer. They don't call out. They don't greet. They simply fall into the same direction, as if the village itself has turned them both toward the church. The church door is heavy wood, darkened by weather and hands. The iron fittings are cold even in summer. When the door opens, it makes a sound that feels older than the houses, a slow groan that settles into the air, and then disappears. Inside, the church smells different from everything else. Cold stone, wax dampness that never fully leaves. A faint lingering of incense if the priest has used it recently. The air is still, and it holds sound in a quiet way. Footsteps seem louder for a moment. A cough becomes a clear statement. People enter without hurry. They settle on benches, or stand if there isn't room, or because standing feels more respectful. Respect here isn't dramatic. It's practical. You respect the church because the village does. You respect it because everyone is listening, and you don't want to be the one who doesn't. The priest's voice, when it begins, is calm and steady. It doesn't rise and fall like a performance. It sits in the room like a low fire. The words themselves matter, but the tone matters too. It tells you that the day is being closed, that the village is being gathered into a shared stillness. A child fidgets, then is guided into quiet with a gentle hand on a shoulder. A woman's fingers move across a simple bead string, or just fold together, palms pressed lightly. A man stares at the stone floor, eyes unfocused, letting the sound wash over him without turning it into a thought. What people rarely noticed was how the church gave tired minds a place to rest that wasn't sleep. A place where you could stop calculating for a few minutes. Stop counting grain. Stop counting hours. The world outside doesn't disappear, but it loosens its grip slightly. The service is not long. It doesn't need to be. The day has already taken most of everyone's strength. The church fits itself into what remains. When it ends, people stand up slowly. Knees straighten. Cloaks are adjusted. A few low murmurs pass between neighbors, not social chatter, more like quiet acknowledgements. A hand touches another arm briefly. Someone nods. Someone steps aside to let another pass. The church door opens again, and cold night air slides in, clean and sharp compared to the damp inside. Outside, the lane feels different for a moment, as if the church has changed the air around it. The stars are clearer. The hush is deeper. A dog's bark from far off sounds smaller. The village seems to hold itself with more care. Meanwhile, not everyone goes inside. Some remain at home, not because they are careless, but because the evening tasks are real. A baby that needs feeding, an older parent whose body can't handle the cold, a pot that must not be left alone. The village is not a single mind. It's a set of needs that sometimes conflict gently. And still, even those who don't go feel the church's presence. They hear the bell. They know the moment is happening. They pause without thinking, perhaps only for a breath, as if the village itself has trained their body to mark the sound. Over time, this became normal. A shared clock made of stone and bell, woven into a life of mud and smoke. After the church door closes and the last people return to their homes, the village slips back into household rhythms. Bowls are rinsed. Ashes banked. A small stick is added to coals to keep them alive. A child is guided onto straw and tucked in, with a blanket that smells of wool and smoke. The household sounds are soft now. A spoon set down. A bench creaking under someone shifting their weight. The faint whisper of cloth as a woman folds a garment with hands that can't fully stop working even while tired. Then, in the quiet of late evening, another kind of village life begins to appear. Not in every village, not every night, but often enough that it feels like part of the pattern. A neighbor steps into the lane and knocks on another door. Not hard, just a gentle knock, more signal than demand. The door opens a crack. A low exchange happens. Then the door opens wider, and the neighbor steps in. Inside, the room is warm, and the fire is low. A few people are gathered. Not a crowd, just enough for a small circle of attention. This is not a feast. There is no abundance. It is simply a place where a few neighbors have decided to share a little warmth and a little talk. The talk is quiet. It doesn't have the bounce of celebration. It has the slow, steady tone of people sorting through the day together. Someone mentions a fence that fell. Someone else offers a spare stake. Someone remarks that the ditch needs clearing again. Another nods, already imagining which morning could be spared for it. These are not thrilling topics. Still, they matter. They are the village's hidden structure. A dry remark slips in about the manor's steward and the way he counts. It lands, not as rebellion, but as recognition. The room makes a low sound, half amusement, half fatigue. The remark isn't repeated loudly. It doesn't turn into a plan. It simply exists, like a small vent for pressure. The truth is, people here understand power without romanticizing it. They know what is owed. They know what will be taken. They also know that arguing loudly rarely changes anything. So cynicism becomes a small protective layer, thin enough to laugh at, thick enough to keep the heart from being surprised. For a while, the talk shifts toward more personal things. A child's cough that hasn't fully gone. A mother's worry that the next winter will be harsh. A father's quiet pride that the beans came up better this year than last. These are not spoken like confessions. They are spoken the way weather is spoken, as part of life that must be met. A hand passes a cup. The cup holds something warm, perhaps weak ale, perhaps warmed water with herbs. It is not meant to intoxicate. It is meant to soften the body's edges. The cup is small. The sip is measured. You can hear the fire breathing under ash, a gentle crackle that comes and goes. The smell of smoke lingers in everyone's hair and cloth. The room's warmth sits on cheeks and makes faces look a little younger for a moment. For a while, this is the village's late, evening mercy. People allowed to exist together without doing heavy work, without being alone in their thoughts. Meanwhile, outside, the church stands in darkness, and the manor remains beyond the fields like a distant pressure. Even in warmth, people carry awareness of what belongs to them and what does not. Over time, this became normal too, private warmth built inside public constraints. As the night deepens, the small gathering breaks apart. Not abruptly, it dissolves. One person stands, stretches, and pulls their cloak close. Another pats a neighbor's shoulder once. A third checks the door bar and nods. Satisfied, people step back into the lane, and the cold meets them again. It doesn't feel harsh, it feels clean. The sky is darker now. Stars are more visible. The lane is mostly empty, but you can hear small signs of life behind walls. A baby's soft cry that is quickly soothed. A cough. The rustle of straw. The whisper of an adult voice speaking to a child who doesn't want sleep yet. A dog pads along the lane, nose down, reading the night through smell. It pauses near a gate, then moves on. The dog is not hunting trouble. It is simply moving through the village's sleeping body, making sure the familiar scent map still makes sense. In one yard, an animal shifts in a stall. Straw rustles. A hoof stamps once, then quiet again. The sound is dull, contained, and it sinks back into the night. A soft orientation arrives in the way the night's pace becomes clearer. The village is not moving outward anymore. It is moving inward. Everything that happens now happens close to home, close to heat. Inside a house, someone checks the latch one last time. The latch clicks. A bar is set. The person stands still for a moment, listening. Not for intruders, not with fear, but for the simple reassurance that the house is settled. The fire is banked. The animals are secure. The children are asleep or close to it. The person exhales slow and controlled, then turns and lies down. Straw shifts under weight. Wool blanket scratches lightly at the chin. The body finds a position that hurts the least. A hand tucks under an arm. A shoulder loosens. The mind drifts. What people rarely noticed was how complicated it is to fall asleep when life depends on waking early. Sleep in a village is not a luxury. It is a tool. It must arrive in time. It must last long enough. It must leave you able to stand again. The room holds its small sounds. Breathing. A low crackle from embers. The faint creak of wood as the house settles deeper into cold. The wind moving along the thatch like a slow brush. And then, quietly, sleep begins to take the house in pieces. One person's breathing slows first. Another person's shoulders drop. A child's little hand relaxes from its curled position. The dog sighs a long exhale, then becomes still. Outside, the village does the same. The lane's last movement fades. The well is silent. The church remains dark. The manor remains out there, still waiting, still claiming. But for these few hours it cannot reach into the rooms. For a while, this worked. And it worked so well that it became the village's quiet secret, even under obligation. Even under scarcity. Even under the constant return of work, the night still belonged to the body. Later, when the sky begins to thin again, the bell will come back, and the latch will lift, and the well rope will slide through hands. But that isn't the feeling now. Now the feeling is the village holding itself in low warmth, the shared clock of the church having done its small work, and the ordinary people of the village letting the day finally fall away, not with an ending, but with a slow, gentle settling into rest. By the time the night is fully settled, the village has drawn in on itself like a breath held gently. The lane no longer feels like a place meant for walking. It feels like a space between rooms, a dark pause where nothing is expected to happen. The ground has cooled again, and whatever dampness the day left behind has begun to return, quietly reclaiming low spots and edges. Inside the houses, the rhythm of life has narrowed to its smallest movements. A fire that was carefully banked earlier now gives off only a faint glow, a dull red beneath ash. It does not light the room. It barely warms it. Still, its presence matters. It means the morning will not begin from nothing. Someone earlier made sure of that. Most people are asleep now, though sleep in a village is rarely deep and uninterrupted. It comes in layers. A person drifts, then wakes briefly, then drifts again. The body never fully forgets that it will be asked to work soon. Even rest carries a kind of readiness. In one house, a man shifts on his pallet. Straw rustles softly. His shoulder aches where the hoe handle pressed all day. He adjusts, moving the ache into a place that hurts less. The movement is slow, practiced. He has done this before. He will do it again. His breathing evens out, and the ache settles into the background, where it will stay until morning reminds him again. Nearby, a woman sleeps with one arm flung across a child's back. The child's body is warm and solid, heavy in sleep. The woman's hand opens and closes once, as if checking that the child is still there. Then the hand rests again, fingers loose, trust returning. The air inside the house smells like smoke and wool and bodies that have worked hard. It is not a clean smell, but it is familiar. Familiar smells make sleep easier. They tell the body it is in the right place. Outside, the wind moves through the hedges and along the roofs. It does not howl. It does not threaten. It brushes and moves on, brushes and moves on. The sound is steady enough to fade into the background, the way water does when you stop paying attention to it. For a while, nothing changes. Then, somewhere, a door inside a house creaks softly. Someone has woken and needs to move, careful not to disturb the others. Bare feet touch packed earth or wooden floor. The cold bites lightly. The person inhales through the nose and keeps moving. A pail is lifted. Water is poured quietly into a small basin. Hands are washed. The water is cold, shocking enough to sharpen the mind for a moment. The person pauses, listening. Breathing from the others remains steady. The house has accepted the movement without complaint. The person sets the basin aside and returns to the pallet, pulling the blanket back into place. Straw rustles again, then settles. This, too, is part of the night. A dog shifts and resettles near the hearth. It circles once, twice, then lowers itself with a soft grunt. The dog's body forms a tight curve, conserving warmth. Its breathing slows. Dogs in villages sleep like this, alert without effort, trusting the familiar sounds around them. In another house, an older person lies awake longer than the rest. Sleep comes more slowly with age. The older person listens to the night the way you listen to a story you already know. The creak of the beams, the faint crackle of embers, a distant animal sound. The older person's thoughts drift, not sharply, not with worry, just moving through memories and small observations. They think about the field work, about how the soil felt today, about the market trip, whether it will be worth it this time, about a grandchild who has grown taller without asking permission. These thoughts do not pile up. They come one by one, then pass. Eventually, even the older person's mind loosens its grip, and sleep arrives in pieces. The village, at this hour, feels held together by trust more than by walls or latches. Trust that the roof will hold through the night. Trust that the fire will last until morning. Trust that neighbors will hear if something truly goes wrong. This trust is not spoken. It is built slowly, through hundreds of ordinary nights that ended without disaster. What people rarely noticed was how much of village life depended on this quiet confidence. The church stands in darkness, its stones absorbing the night cold. The bell is silent, and in its silence it feels almost gentle, as if even it understands that nothing more is required right now. The churchyard lies still, the ground uneven and dark. Dew begins to settle there first, clinging to grass and stone alike. Beyond the village, the fields rest. Furrows soften in the night air. The soil releases heat slowly, like a body cooling after work. Insects move through the grass unseen, continuing their own small lives without regard for human schedules. Somewhere farther off, on the road, a traveler might be moving. A cartwheel might creak. Hooves might strike firmer ground. The village does not react. It has learned that not every sound is its concern. Most things pass by. Inside the houses, the deepest part of the night arrives. This is the hour when even thoughts feel heavy, when the body gives up its small resistance and sinks fully into rest. Breathing deepens. Muscles loosen. Hands unclench. A child dreams, shifting slightly, murmuring a sound that does not form a word. The sound is quickly absorbed by the room. An adult turns their head toward it without opening their eyes, then relaxes again. The fire, now mostly embers, glows faintly, then dims, then glows again as ash shifts. It is not in danger of dying yet. It has been banked well. Someone took the time to do that, and the fire remembers. The truth is, nights like this are what allow the village to exist at all. Not the busy days, not the visible labor, but these hours when bodies are repaired in small, invisible ways. When strength is quietly returned without being asked for. As the night stretches on, time becomes less noticeable. There is no rush toward morning, no sense of countdown, just the slow passing of hours, marked only by changes in the air and the body's shifting weight. Eventually, the sky will begin to thin again. The cold will sharpen slightly. The rooster will test its voice. A latch will lift. The well rope will slide through someone's hands. The cycle will begin again. But that is not now. Now is the still center of the night, when the village is at its most honest. Not producing, not negotiating, not planning, simply existing in a shared pause. The houses hold their sleepers. The lane holds its silence. The fields hold their promise. The church holds time without using it. And for a little while longer, the village is allowed to sleep. Night does not end all at once. It thins, not into morning, not yet. Into a softer kind of dark, where the edges of things are less sharp, and the body stops keeping track of time. The village rests in that space without naming it. Inside the houses, nothing important is happening anymore. The fire has been banked as low as it will go. Only a few red points remain under ash, breathing slowly, holding their promise without needing attention. The room no longer changes much. Warmth stays where it has settled. Cold stays at the edges. The balance holds. Bodies are still. Someone turns once on straw, then finds a position that hurts less. A blanket is pulled higher without waking fully. A hand rests against another arm, not gripping, just there. Breathing deepens, and then evens out, the kind of breathing that means the body has finally stopped arguing with the day. Outside, the lane has emptied of purpose. It is no longer a place to go or return. It is simply space between walls. The ground has cooled. Dampness returns quietly. A puddle reflects nothing at all. The well is silent. The rope hangs slack. The bucket rests. It will wait as long as it needs to. The church stands dark and unused, its bell holding its silence. The stones do not expect anything. They have learned patience better than people ever could. Beyond the village, the fields are invisible now, but still present. Furrows softened, soil holding the day's warmth and giving it back slowly, like a long breath released. Nothing is being asked of them. They are allowed to be still. A wain moves once through the hedges, then passes on. A beam creaks as wood settles further into cool. Somewhere an animal shifts and then becomes quiet again. The sound does not spread. It stays contained, absorbed by the night. This is the hour when even memory slows. The mind no longer replays the day in order. It lets go of sequence. The ache in the shoulders fades into the background. The small worries lose their edges. Thoughts drift without needing to land anywhere useful. Sleep here is not dramatic. It does not arrive like a door closing. It spreads. First the hands stop clenching. Then the jaw loosens. Then the muscles forget what they were holding. Breath deepens again, slower this time, steady enough that it no longer needs noticing. The house becomes a collection of quiet breaths and stored warmth. What people rarely noticed was that this was the village's true state. Not the work. Not the movement. Not the noise. This pause, shared across walls and lanes, where nothing is required and nothing is expected. Even the outside world loosens its grip. The man awaits, but it cannot reach into this hour. The road continues somewhere beyond, but it does not pull. Time itself seems willing to sit down for a while. The village does not think about tomorrow now. It does not prepare. It does not plan. It simply allows itself to remain. Ash settles, coals dim further. A blanket slips a little and is pulled back up without waking. Breath matches breath in the room, then drifts apart again, each body finding its own quiet rhythm. Nothing needs attention. Nothing is unfinished in a way that matters. The night holds, and within it, the village rests exactly where it is, carried by habit, by warmth, and by the ordinary mercy of stillness, letting the dark stay dark a little longer, until even the idea of time becomes soft enough to disappear,